I believe we are unlisted right now. So if you could just go in and just... Oh, wait, I can... How do I send you the link?
Just
So if you could just
right-click on the video and say copy link.
Oh, wait, I can... How do I send you the link? Oh, I can listen to it here.
Just
So if you could just
right-click on the video and say copy link.
Oh, wait, I can... How do I send you the link? Oh, I can listen to it here.
Just
So if you could just
right-click.
Okay, so we have a problem here. I'm not getting any audio from you at all.
Well, I'm not talking.
No, even when you're talking, I'm not getting anything from you.
Let me open up my OBS and see what we can do.
Oh,
I don't know why that would happen. Do you have the input set to desktop audio? Because it should play whatever's...
Okay, no, now I'm getting you now. Okay.
Okay. Then we good.
Now I'm getting you.
We Gucci.
Okay. We Gucci?
Am I loud enough?
We Gucci?
Am I loud enough? You can actually, in Discord, you can turn my volume up. Loud enough? Or at least, you can actually, in Discord, if you right-click my face,
yeah, I think you're fine.
The user volume. So if you need to change that, you can slide the user volume there.
Yeah, I think you're fine.
Okay.
And I guess now we edit and we go live. And then some people in the future might listen to these first few minutes and be like, wow, you guys sound like noobs. And yes, we are.
Oh, does it, in like the version that gets posted, does it include the time that it's like unlisted or whatever?
I think so.
Oh, I did not know that. That's frightening.
Yeah, it's whatever. Okay, I think we are now public.
Okay.
And
Can you send me the link?
Uh-oh.
Oh, no, I see it. Never mind, I see it.
And now we just wait to see for some lovely viewers.
Oh, that thing came out and looking good. I'm proud of that.
Yeah. Oh, I should change how my screens are looking here, so I can actually.
Chris and Lexie discuss the conservative leadership race, general politics, and take Q&A from chat. See, I didn't actually know what we were talking about until we came in here.
Yeah. Hello, Apex. Just gonna wait for a couple more people to pop in before we start off the spiel and start doing
hi,
things.
Apex. Okay, so chat is like ever so slightly delayed if you're just a casual viewer. That's interesting. What is our first topic?
Well, it's a lovely topic that I was going to make a thing for, but I didn't because I forgot and was busy doing other things. Success. It's a segment that I'm going to be calling The Libs of Charade. Basically, we are going to take a look at a bunch of campaign statements that Charade or his authorized agents have said that, well, sound extremely like liberal talking points.
So we're doing a Libs of TikTok ripoff?
Yes.
Love it.
Not subtle at all.
Oh man, we should have gotten like other people's quotes to mix in, because I haven't heard these, and then I could like guess.
That would have been smart, and maybe in the future, if I ever do something like this, I will do that. Oh, we're now getting a bunch
for anyone...
Okay.
Hi, Madbeast. For anybody curious, I don't know what we're talking about tonight. This is all going to be a surprise for me.
Yep, she's going to have no idea what's going on. Looks like we have a couple people in here, so let's begin the main segment.
All right, so what's Charade been up to?
So, these are all...
Wait, should we introduce ourselves?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
Maybe we should introduce ourselves. So, I'll start. So, I am Chris. I am the host of the Great Canadian Bagel, the main person making the videos, and with me I have a lovely guest, Lexie Cole.
Yes, my name is Lexie. I am, among other things, I'm Chris's girlfriend, and I'm the artist that does most of his fancier thumbnails, including this lovely splash screen with the bagels, which I'm pretty proud of, I gotta say.
With that, though, let us begin the first segment. I will note, every single screenshot I'm about to show do come from authorized emails from the Charade campaign. And if anyone wants, I can provide the actual email but I only cut out the relevant parts, and they're not in chronological order at all because that
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
matter.
you're on everybody's mailing list, aren't you?
Yes, I have the power of joining mailing lists.
That's like how Ben Shapiro's on like every Democrat mailing list.
So to begin,
That was fun during the primaries.
let us start with the first uh, snippet here. So, just to read it to people who are not watching the screen, because you might not be doing this, because in a lot of ways this is more of a podcast.
Ah.
They hear wild speculation, they, in this case being Canadians, about Bitcoin, and they ask, when did conservatives start telling Canadians to take big financial risks? They hear talk of superiority of the Anglo-Saxon language, and they think, do I even want to be associated with this party anymore?
Why is Bitcoin suddenly a talking point? When did this happen? Did I miss something?
Okay, so early in the campaign, I want to say in March, Poilievre sat down with a Egyptian immigrant. I can't think of the man's name, and they discuss and the Egyptian guy is a big Bitcoin proponent. He likes the idea of people being able to use Bitcoin to buy products. And right now, the way our laws work is you get that transaction is considered like basically if I gave you a share in a stock, that is how it's considered to the tax people.
Oh, like, oh, under tax law. Okay, that's weird.
It's not considered a monetary transaction. It sounds it's you're transferring assets.
Okay, that's an issue if you're talking about basically a currency.
In this video, which, well, let's not even let's just cut away to it. Just bear with me here. That is the wrong video segment. Here we go. I will let the man himself say what he said, and then everyone can see what he said. And it's a long video. It is on his YouTube page if you want to see the entire thing, but this is the relevant segment here.
My view is freedom. Let people choose. I'm not going to force anybody to use a particular type of cryptocurrency.
On
as Prime
1.5
Minister.
times
I'm simply going to give you the freedom to choose it. If you believe that the Bitcoin is the best tool for you to transact, as Ali has decided, well, you can do that. If you decide it's Ethereum or Dogecoin or the Canadian dollar, you can do that too. But what we need in this, as long as you pay all of your taxes on all of the same taxes you would pay in normal money, as long as you follow all the same laws as everyone else, everything that is legal with Canadian dollars should be legal with Bitcoin, everything that's illegal should be illegal. But as long as you follow the same laws, pay the same taxes, and respect the same norms, you should be free to decide what kind of money you use. And guess what else this will do?
So that is the relevant clip there. So essentially, all Poilievre is saying is people should be able to use the currency they want in a transaction, and it should be considered a currency. And they still have to pay taxes.
Here's what's interesting about that. So, like, introducing a second currency, it's weird, but it's not. So, for example, you would think like, okay, they want to be able to measure taxes and all that in currencies other than the Canadian dollar under Canadian tax law, and you would think like, wow, that sounds weird and complicated. Maybe that's why countries only usually have one currency, but we see transactions happen in other currencies all the time. Like, a lot of transactions are done in US dollars, even like between Canadians. And the tax people seem to figure that out just fine. So, I don't know why this is like raising that much alarm. Like, it's weird if you don't think about it very hard, but I don't know. Maybe that's just a lot of things there. Or a lot of things are weird if you don't think about them very hard, I mean.
Yeah. It's a weird takeaway that the mainstream media and like the Liberals and the NDP have taken from this is that he's saying to Canadians, use Bitcoin to avoid inflation, when he's actually saying you should be allowed to use Bitcoin if you want to use Bitcoin. And he says many times that Bitcoin is very volatile in that video. So it's just crazy. Charest's campaign is exactly parroting this the mainstream media and the Liberal Party's talking points on Polyev here. Exactly.
Okay, but can we do like the Chad yes on use Bitcoin to escape inflation? Like, if your currency is inflating so fast, like go for it. Use a different one. Like that. Why is this like a bad suggestion? Like what is the outcome that they're afraid of?
What they're claiming is that since Bitcoin has crashed recently, which I was going to try to get a screenshot of the 5-year track of Bitcoin, but I couldn't find the one that looked nice, so I didn't have one. But basically, they're claiming that since Bitcoin's crashed recently, that this was financial advice, and he's telling Canadians to invest in a risky, unsafe asset, which is just ridiculous, because he's not saying that. And importantly, Bitcoin crashes pretty much every single April, May, because that's when the miners typically sell all of the coins they have since mined. Now, is it always the same amount of crash? No. It's a volatile currency, that's for sure. But again, Polyev never says you should do it. It's just you should be allowed to do it.
I don't know, maybe I'm missing something here, but like, why do we care if a candidate is giving like kind of shitty financial advice? I mean, we have NDP candidates trying to introduce shit like rent controls, and I would call that shitty financial advice.
Well, the argument is it hurts the credibility of the Conservative Party because they're supposed to be fiscally responsible.
Man, if that's all what people know us for, then we kind of deserve to crash.
Now, the other thing here, the other section of this quote, I have an entire video on how stupid the entire Anglo-Saxon controversy is. And Charest, this is not just the only quote from a Charest affiliate or himself. He said this multiple times, attacking Polyev, parroting the CTV talking point and what the Liberals are saying, the NDP are saying. And you would think another Conservative wouldn't just be talking exactly what the opposition is saying when critiquing another Conservative. But no. And this entire thing is bunk. The entire controversy, more detail, you can watch the video. It's on my channel. But the entire thing is basically predicated on CTV didn't do their due diligence. It's common linguistics advice if you want to improve your diction for public speaking or writing.
Yeah, that was a whole... I mean, it's one of those very grasping at straws, very reachy kind of criticisms that you hear when they're really, really scared of somebody, that they just grab whatever they can. We have a few comments in chat here.
Yes, before we go on to the next quote, we can check what anyone else is saying.
Mike G is asking, can you pay for goods and taxes in foreign currencies? Would it not be the same thing / problem? As far as I know, you can. I know that just from like a contract perspective, many contracts are done in foreign currencies. Like, for example, a lot of contracts between companies that reside in different countries are done in US dollars, and no matter which two countries that they're in. So if a Canadian company is contracting with a British company in US dollars, then that Canadian company still gets taxed for that contract. So it doesn't really cause a big problem. You get cross-currency... is that the right term for that? I don't know. But you get transactions happening in a different currency than your country's currency all the time, and the CRA doesn't seem to cope with that too poorly. So
a actual specific example of that, the company I work at is headquartered in the United Kingdom, but I am in a subsidiary in Canada. But since our headquarters is in the United Kingdom, our subsidiary talks about all our fiscal figures in British pounds. Internally, we work on British pounds in the company, but I am paid in Canadian money.
And you know what? Your company probably takes contracts that are paid for in American dollars.
Yes, probably. Most of our business is with the U.S. government, so...
Yeah, businesses will do that just because they pick a currency that's stable. And they just choose to run their contracts in that currency, and it can be anything they want. Let's see. It's weird how Pierre does cool stuff like this. I feel like he was a real party animal in uni. Yeah, it's a weird image to look at Pierre and this dude in like this uptown little living room with these hookah pipes. Like, I don't know how this came to be, but it's really funny.
I mean, it really shows he doesn't care about looking, quote unquote, like a politician. And I think most people shouldn't care about looking, quote unquote, like a politician, because most politicians look fake as hell to me.
Legit Hackster says, "What's up, Bagel and Lexie? How we doing? We're doing good. We doing good. We're trying a new stream format with an actual background this time."
Yeah. Now, that said, let's go to quote number 2. And again, for any new people who have joined since then, these are all quotes straight from the Charade campaign or designated affiliates, such as Tasha Caridian or Ed Fast, and there's a couple others. CBC Radio Canada. I support an aggressive review of CBC and Radio Canada's mandate to keep it focused on things that the private sector can't deliver on its own. The CBC doesn't need to be buying American shows and rebroadcasting them here, or paying comedians to tweet out jokes, but defunding the public broadcaster entirely will harm Canada, particularly rural and northern Canada. Hey, Alex. Fun to see you here.
Oh, hello, Alex. How's it going? Yeah, I don't know why they're so worried about rural Canada.
Yes.
We do have internet.
This is the one that I'm always shocked about, and you always hear this when people are critiquing the argument for defunding the CBC. So generally speaking, you're talking about left-wingers doing this, because I've never really seen a right-winger make a right-wing argument for it. It's always, it's going to harm rural Canada. Do you guys...
That's like the only time that they care about rural Canada.
Sit here and think of, yes, rural Canada does not have television and the internet if it wasn't for CBC? Like, how? In what way is this hurting rural Canada?
Maybe like Radio Canada, but even then, like there's other French outlets than just Radio Canada. Like, I think that they think CBC does a lot more than it does. I think that they're worried that, like, Canadian productions won't happen anymore if not for CBC, but, like, if CBC is our best example of Canadian productions, then maybe we just shouldn't make any.
Oh, what was that show you saw the other day that was
oh my god,
set in Halifax, and they were not speaking any dialogue that any Maritimer would ever say?
I was watching Digstown, which is supposed to take place in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, which is the other side of Halifax. And they're calling like the last year of high school senior year instead of grade 12, and they're in it's a court drama. It's a legal drama, and they're in a courtroom and they're calling the judge Your Honor, which if you guys don't know, in Canada we don't call the judge Your Honor. You call them my lord or my lady, depending on who your judge is. And it was just bizarre how little research they put into like even if they had hired Canadian actors, they would know not to say some of these things. It was very, very strange. So it's weird to call that Canadian content when it's basically just, oh, we're in a Canadian place. That's probably good enough. Legit Haxo says, yes, as a Northern Canadian, I can confirm CBC is the only channel on TV.
Matt Beastity, it's interesting to see an argument for not defunding the CBC. It's not normally the arguments are exactly as posted in this quote, and I'd be interesting to see sometime like a more thought out approach. Obviously, I'm not going to put you on the spot right now in the middle of a stream because the obvious power and balance of discussing with this stream, though we can definitely both agree its mandate is definitely a bit funky right now. And at least Saray agrees with that, though whether he's actually going to do anything, I don't know. But that said, let's move to quote number 3. Oh wait, Lex, you want to say something?
Hang on. Mohan Bai says, do we really need a part of propaganda machine? No. In my opinion, no. Mad Beast, mad respect to you, but I'd be interested to hear your argument too, but I also don't want you to put you on the spot. But I find that the concept of a government-funded media agency of any format to be very suspicious. Like, I feel like that's going to turn into nothing but a propaganda agency, like whether you want it to or not. There's no way that when your money is coming all from one place, you're not going to piss off the person that your money's coming from, right? And Mike G says, fiscal responsibility is the only thing that libs will give us as a positive aspect of the conservatives, but conservative fiscal responsibility just means austerity and destruction of services to many. Interesting. So is it, I don't know, is it bad to go Chad? Yes. I guess my point was that if fiscal conservatism is the only thing that the conservatives are for, then why bother having an entire party at all? Like, does that mean that if the liberals suddenly picked up fiscal conservatism, that the conservative party would be cool with them? Like, no, obviously not. So, or actually, you know what? The modern conservative party might be, but I don't think Pierre's government would. So, I guess fiscal conservatism is good, but it's not enough to be the foundation of a party.
I think
Mikey,
the
sorry.
core problem I see with focusing just on fiscal responsibility is it ignores the fact that politics isn't just about how do we spend tax money. There's all sorts of social concerns and moral issues that the government does rule on. And people often like to say that the government shouldn't have a comment on morality, but it inherently does, or else we wouldn't have crimes.
Mike G says, I've grown up with specifically Radio CBC and have enjoyed a lot of the content. I can't really speak to the radio programs because I haven't really listened to them much. But I know that, for example, in Quebec, there's a lot of, excuse me, there's a lot of French radio production. Like, it's not like CBC is the only hope for Canadian productions of any kind. You know what I mean?
And the other thing worth noting, too, about specifically what Poilievre has said, which is why attacks like this are a bit disingenuous, he's not saying he's going to abolish the CBC. It's just defunding it. And defunding it could very well just mean the television news and shows, which I can't think of any reason why those need to exist.
Yeah, it would be basically forcing the CBC to stand on its own feet the way every other media company has to. Like, they take ads and stuff. They have revenue outside of the government, but that doesn't mean that they're not, like, a government entity because they get a huge amount of funding from the government, and they're obviously controlled. Like, they're like a... I don't think they're a crown corporation. I think they...
No, they are.
Are they? I'm not sure.
They are.
Oh, they are a crown corporation? Yeah. So, it would basically make them cease being a crown corporation and make them actually make their own money. And they do make some money, so they would just have to make content that's worth watching enough to actually pay for all the content that they're making, just like everybody else has to. The only time I've ever watched CBC is for Hockey Night in Canada, nothing else. Hockey Night in Canada probably could have stood on its own.
Well, until they fired Don Cherry.
Mohan Bai says, based on my 30-year life in China, letting one voice dominate the narrative is definitely not fun. That's very interesting. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And that's a lesson that I think we need to learn from elsewhere in the world as well. The vagueness of what defunding means in practice is why I don't usually get worked up by the issue. That's probably good. Yeah, it doesn't mean, like, shutting down the CBC and making sure it can never make anything again. It just basically means making them make their own way, which is what we expect of every media company.
Now, let's move on to quote number 3. Is this quote number 3? Doesn't matter. I've already lost count.
It is, yeah.
The supposed frontrunner candidate launched vicious general election-style attacks against his fellow conservatives. Notice, now, I did clip a lot of this email, but again, just comment below or comment on the video probably more accurately, and I will post the email or link to the email if you want to cross-reference this. But this is all it said. There's no singular reference. There's no examples provided. And Charest has done campaign emails where he has linked to videos. He's not linked to a single thing. He has not added any other context. Just this. And
that's the full sentence. Okay. I was expecting more.
Nope, that is accusing Poilievre of attacking fellow conservatives with general election style attack ads. And
yeah,
it's
an election.
Well, ignoring that, it's just patently untrue. Like, the only examples that I'm aware of, and I've been paying very close attention to this, so if I'm not aware of them, it's going to be a very niche attack. It's mostly been Poilievre critiquing Charest's record or defending himself when Brown has attacked him, or equally when Charest attacked him.
Charest finds being asked about how much money he made from Huawei to be a personal attack.
Like, Exactly. So Poilio says something like that to Charest during a debate, and then Charest says he should be disbarred from the race for supporting the trucker convoy and removed from the party. Like, these are two very different things. One is a morality judgment from Charest, and the other is Poilio saying your record doesn't stand with what you're saying right now. That is
Also,
a
what is
perfectly
this other
normal
than
attack.
what is this other than an attack against a fellow conservative? Like Charest? Hello?
Yes. And the idea that you're going to have a race without attacks is silly. Like, I think Canadians, particularly older Canadians, are used to, like, the time when all the politicians were... There wasn't not much disagreement in politics. Everyone pretty much broadly agreed on most things. But in the age of the internet, that's just not true anymore. So the idea that in the internet age that you're going to have people have a broad agreement on anything is silly. It's just impossible. It's just too easy to find other people who agree with you to have everyone agree with the same thing.
Apex says, how are you guys? We're doing good. How are you, Apex? Yeah, I don't know why they're attacking their opponents is becoming an attack of its own. That's like critiquing a sports team for playing against the other team. It's very strange to me. Maybe it's just because I'm accustomed to keeping more track of American politics than I am of Canadian politics, and everything is a blood sport over there, and I freaking love it. I
definitely think this is a generational thing. I think people who grew up with the internet and use the internet a lot don't actually care that much about attacks versus people who did not grow up with the internet. Because when you're talking about like the 90s, when you only had like 4 cable channels, that's where most of the campaigning was done through, and in-person events, you didn't really see a lot of attacks, and people wouldn't really see that kind of hostility. But on the internet, everyone attacks everyone. It's just a bloodbath. The internet is just like a PvP server where you just grief the lower level players. It sounds bad, but that's just what it is. And any attempts to reform that will destroy the value of the internet. It's just what you have to accept. And as someone who posts things on the internet, you just have to accept that if you're on the internet, people are going to attack you.
But like, okay, in this day and age, like you say, most people in our generation wouldn't they wouldn't care if candidates are attacking each other. I don't think we would even notice. Like, that's just kind of what you would expect when you're trying to win. You want to win. Your opinion, excuse me, your opponent needs to lose. Like, what else do you expect? I don't understand what the issue is here.
The other thing worth noting on this one is this exact quote has almost been parroted all of the time on all of the mainstream news networks, CTV, Global, CBC, all of them. They just keep saying this as if it is bad that Poilievre is doing this. They're not. And again, none of them give examples of these attacks he's doing. It's like it's the best thing that you see establishment media do. Someone's running counter-establishment, and they're like, they did this. They don't give you any proof that they did that. They just say it. If you assert it, it's
trust
true.
Trust me, I'm on the news.
Yeah, trust me, someone pays me $1 million to talk to you. Now, if someone paid me $1 million to talk to you guys, that would be awesome. But...
Would you start ragging on people for attacking their opponents if you were being paid $1 million to do it?
No. I hope someone paying me $1 million is going to get what they're paying for. I'm not going to change. I don't care. Yeah, Mohan, that is exactly what it seems like these days. And you see this sentiment coming around all the time that if the establishment attacks someone, maybe that person's someone you should vote for in politics. It's getting to the point where it's completely self-defeating. It's kind of funny.
But it's not even like it's not even they're attacking someone, I should check them out because that probably means they're cool. It's like the attacks that they make them sound cool. Like I read these Pierre attack these attack slogans. It's like, oh, based, let's get more of that.
There was a lot of that with during the height of the pandemic around Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, where they'd be like, he's not doing COVID lockdowns, and it's like, is that a bad thing?
I would like to live there, please. Legit hack source. Pierre Poilievre sells cocaine. Trust me. CBC op-ed writer.
Too true.
Yeah, but they want cocaine to be decriminalized, so they probably wouldn't even say that. Oh, that's good.
No,
I
they're
like
going to
that.
say Poilievre supports illegalizing cocaine, even though it's already illegal. He supports the status quo. No. Now,
Double secret illegal, like that lynching ban.
let us move to, I'm going to call it number 4. Da, da, da. I will repeal the Trudeau consumer carbon tax and replace it with an industrial carbon price to slash emissions while giving provinces the flexibility to choose their path to emission reductions. Our environmental plan and clean growth plan will create jobs, support our energy sector, and grow the economy while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. Now, this mostly sounds good on first pass.
Does it? I've been
Mostly.
my eyebrows very much furrowed.
Yes, we all, at least I know all your opinions on this. The big problem with this is it sounds like a quote-unquote good thing until you realize this isn't rejecting the core conceit of the Liberal position on this matter. And I will defend this night and day. Carbon tax doesn't make sense at all. The only way it would work is if every single country in the entire world used a carbon tax. Doesn't matter if you move it off consumers, even if it's just on industry, still doesn't work, because what it's going to say is, let's say you're a paper mill. You just go to a different country. You didn't reduce emissions, you've actually increased emissions. Because now that paper, instead of being made in northern Nova Scotia, is now being made in Indonesia and has to be shipped halfway around the world to get here. So you've actually made everything worse. And this isn't even just a hypothetical scenario. You look at Canada's carbon emissions. Under Trudeau, they've increased. Under Harper, they were slowly going down. Huh.
So, okay, that's actually not the thing that I noticed. Like, carbon taxes are bullshit because even without that whole moving emissions around thing, there is a hard floor of carbon usage that you can't reduce past, and no matter how hard you tax carbon, you're not going to get people to lower their emissions any more than a certain threshold. The example that we've mentioned a couple times on this channel is rural people. You can't choose not to drive to work. You simply can't. You can't choose not to heat your house. I don't know how low they want to go, but it can't be zero, and that, like, there's a floor that you're gonna hit, and that floor comes sooner for some people than others. Like, I'm not really in a position to reduce my carbon consumption any more than I already am just by living my life normally. There's nothing I can cut out. I can't stop heating my house. I can't stop driving to work. I don't do much other than that. So a carbon tax is really just charging me extra money for something I can't control. So it doesn't help. It doesn't reduce emissions, at least among certain populations, and it just makes the whole population mad at you. But what I'm confused about is this industrial carbon price. Like, maybe I'm understanding this wrong, but isn't that just moving the carbon tax from the consumer end to the producer end, which will increase prices the same way?
Chad, yes.
Yeah, like, he says that as if gas is going to get cheaper. But if you move the carbon tax to the people that make the gas, they're just going to raise their prices to match that, and it's going to be the same.
Yep.
Like, I don't know who he thinks he's fooling here.
The entire idea that you're going to reduce carbon emissions by changing the demand side equation is just farcical. Like, the only way that could happen is if the entire world had a carbon tax. And it's never going to happen. China will never agree to it, first off, because it would crash their economy. And realistically, it's a, what's the word for it? It's a distraction from things that actually would reduce carbon emissions, like, nuclear power. But no, we can't build those. The Liberals and the NDP and the Greens, they hate nuclear power.
For some reason. Mike is asking, so the tax doesn't affect imported goods. Do you mean a carbon tax?
As far as I'm aware, it doesn't. Maybe Charet's theoretical plan would, though he's not saying that. He's saying it's going to affect industrial carbon price. And the other consideration, too, is even if it did affect imports, it still wouldn't do anything. It would just raise the price in Canada because the emission still occurred in China, where your plastic doodad was made. Maybe it's more expensive to buy it, so maybe Canadians will buy a few less widgets. But what you've done is you've actually just reduced the quality of life in Canada. And you haven't meaningfully affected the environment at all. Because the idea, the goal, if you believe climate change is a serious problem, isn't to reduce consumption, because that's a foolhardy goal that's not really going to succeed. People are going to consume. That's people. That's why we exist, to consume things. Well, I mean, that's not why we exist, but that is a consequence of our existence. The only way to make this work is to make it so you use less carbon to make a product. And a carbon tax is never going to do that meaningfully.
Mohan Bai says NDP's questions why not hold all gas companies accountable. I don't know really. I mean, that whole hold companies accountable shit. I don't understand that line. I think it's just a buzzword. Like, it doesn't really mean anything. Hold them accountable for what? The crimes that they've committed? Like, if there's crimes, then fine. But I don't know what they're talking about.
Well, they clearly want to do what the British Conservatives are doing, where they're going to just tax the profits of the gas companies, which is just going to raise the price of gas.
The idea that taxes on companies don't just get automatically handed down to consumers and not affect the company at all is laughable to me. Like, as if they're just going to be like, oh, damn, I guess we're just going to make less money. Like, what?
Matt B. City, that is a good point. Nothing else, it does affect it because the CO2 emissions of shipping is increased. The carbon price on that is increased. So yes, it at least affects it in some way, if it directly or just indirectly.
Matt Beast also mentioned that a carbon tax is just a way for the country to make more money, which is exactly what it is.
That's actually exactly what BC is doing now. They've completely dropped their refund scheme or whatever the rebates they were pretending to do, and the Auditor General, the Parliamentary Budget Office, even said that Trudeau's proposed carbon tax increases would net cost to Canadians in affected provinces, I believe, $2,000 a year by the time they hit their maximum level at current forecasts.
Oh my
and
God.
Again, there is no data. This has been 3 years now that our emissions have decreased meaningfully at all. And we've had COVID where we shut down the economy and our emissions still not meaningfully reduced. So why would the carbon tax meaningfully help? Unless you're getting it to the point where people can't afford to drive to see their parents.
This has been offset by companies. Algoma uses crappy CO2 scrubbers, and CSL has switched from HFO to DOE. Okay, that's a whole lot of jargon I don't understand, but I'm sure that's very interesting. Mohan Bai says, have to leave, keep up the good work, bagels, enjoy your nights. Thank you so much for being here, Mohan. I hope you enjoy your night.
And now here...
Or I guess you're...
I was going to say, let us move to number 6. I've definitely lost count here.
I think it's number 5.
Number 5? We'll go with number 5. Conservatism is cautious, prudent, and seeks to make incremental progress, not to burn down institutions that are politically unpopular. So, 2 things with this. 1, what kind of progress, Sheree? It's interesting you didn't define what you meant by progress. Do you mean the progress of as what the Liberals and the NDP mean progress? In which case, you admit here that you're not a conservative. Because if you're a conservative, you don't think that's progress. But if you don't think that's progress, why didn't you say that? And secondly, if an institution is not popular, maybe it should be re-examined. Why have something that the people don't want? The point of government is to represent the people. What do you think, Lex?
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's because it's out of context, but...
No, this is the context. Well, okay.
Is this...
The additional context, he's trying to critique, without saying his name, Poilievre, because Poilievre said he's going to fire the governor of the Bank of Canada.
Oh, the Bank of Canada. This sounded like a response to defunding CBC again.
No.
But also, if that's what he's responding to, why would firing the head of the Bank of Canada erase the Bank of Canada? Like, you could just hire a new guy, pick a smarter dude. Like, that's odd, but
I don't know. That's what he
cautious
said.
and prudent and seeks to make incremental progress, not to burn down. Yeah, I mean, I would have to side with you. If an institution is widely unpopular, then maybe you should look at why it's widely unpopular. Like, maybe do this neat thing in democracies where you actually listen to what your citizens have to say. I know that's a hot take. Anon says, question to Lexie. On a scale of 1 to 10, how romantically attracted are you to Pierre? Listen, he's taken. I don't have the option anymore.
Wow.
We don't need to get into that, Anon, okay? It's in my past. I do like seeing his, it's funny, if you follow his Facebook, like his campaign Facebook page, I swear, like at least 20% of the posts that he make are just pictures of his kids, and it's hilarious. And it's, you know, they make it hard to pay attention, I'll give you that. But if you had the option... Listen, we don't need to go into that. It's fine. You leave it to your imagination. Oh no, what have I started? This is terrible. I'm so sorry.
Well,
I am a big fan, though. Hey, Chris is a big fan, too. Maybe not that way, but we're both pretty big fans.
Matt B said he definitely pass. Not my kind of guy.
You guys are gonna make, like, you guys are, this is gonna have to be like a conversation behind the scenes now. Special. Oh my goodness, you guys. This is off topic, gentlemen.
We should try to keep chat more appropriate. Like, picture like your Christian parent is behind you, your grandmother's behind you. There we go. We'll do it that one.
Is this a dinner table conversation topic, guys? Or I don't know, breakfast table conversation since it's Great Canadian Bagel? I don't know. Anyway, what other kind of nonsense does Sheree have to say?
Yes, moving
Lexie
to number
Bagel.
7.
God, no, legit hacks. No, we don't need that.
No, we don't do that.
We ain't
here.
like that. No, we don't do that here.
So, moving to 7. Have you noticed
Lord.
Poilievre dodges questions? He won't do media scrums after debates. He won't take questions at his events. Now, I can affirmatively say, with the last one, he does. I was at an event in Halifax. He took questions. Now, maybe he didn't sit down with reporters and take questions, but realistically, can you blame him when all the reporters are just going to ask him about why he's a racist for using Anglo-Saxon words? Like, darn, how dare you? And
What's wrong with, like, I'm sorry, but what's wrong with, like, assertively answering a question? Like, if you're... It's not like they don't know that this guy is constantly under attack and needs to answer questions with confidence and with some, like, with a little bit of oomph. Like, you can't be meek and tame with a media that's almost unanimously against you, you know?
Instead of doing the last... I have actually some videos queued up as rebuttal to Sheree's attacks here, so let's see. So, some of you may have already seen this one. This was during the first debate.
You've been criticized for your support for the trucker convoy. One of your fellow candidates has even said you should be disqualified for leadership of the party based on your engagement with the convoy. As we all know, public opinion on the trucker convoy is sharply divided. The Trudeau government and the mainstream media have gone to great lengths to vilify the truckers. And back in February, you said that you were, quote, proud of them.
That's right.
Has your opinion on the trucker convoy changed since? And is your support of the truckers a liability moving forward?
No and no.
There we go. Dodging questions. Do you agree? Do you change your position? No. Really dodged the question there.
The Chad, no. It's like, it's just... this is why you guys make fun of me, but it's so nice to hear a politician not bullshit around a question, you know?
And now...
Like, I just love hearing, like, a nice one-word answer. That's good shit right there.
And now we have a contrasting one from Sheree.
Mr.
same
Charest,
debate.
how much money did you get from Huawei when you were working for them, either directly or indirectly? Just the number, please. How much?
His background music
Just
is
the
great.
number.
Can I?
Mr.
Are we
Charest.
talking about the company that Stephen Harper welcomed into
Just the
Canada?
number, please. How
in
much?
2012.
How much, sir?
We're not on a student
How much?
council here, Pierre.
How much?
Pierre, this is not a student council. Please.
How much? This is the security
This
of our
is-
country,
this
Mr.
is-
Charest. It's not a laughing matter. How much did you get from Huawei?
This is
Answer the question.
government.
How much did you
I am very proud of the fact that I
Mr.
also
Charest,
worked
how much?
to
Answer
free
the question.
the two Michaels and to bring them back home.
Oh,
and
right.
if you want evidence of that, ask the wife of Michael Kovrig, Dina Najibullah.
One at a time, please. One at a time.
So we don't need to listen to the whole clip here, but
I'm sorry, just Pierre in the background just going like, how much? How much? Just behind them. Oh, fuck, that's funny, dude.
Charest, who's dodging questions here? That was a pretty simple question.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
And then another one to address the middle point here. You want to do scrums after debates. I don't have video footage of after the debates. I'm sure he probably answered questions to people. But here's an actual clip of just a random media person asking him a question. And you know what? He answered the question when none of the politicians around him were going to.
What do you think of the extreme element kind of latched onto the truck convoy you supported?
Well, you know what I think is interesting is that when there's a left-wing protest on Parliament Hill, we don't see the Liberal media going through every single name of the people who attends to try and find one person that they can disparage the whole group with. You know, we don't see CBC, for example, has been accused by its own employees of systemic racism. And yet we don't see the media here generalize that everyone who works at the CBC is a racist. Whenever you have 5 or 10,000 people who are part of any group, you're bound to have a number who have or say unacceptable things. And they should be individually responsible for the things they say and do. But that doesn't mean we disparage the thousands of hardworking, law-abiding, and peaceful truckers who, quite frankly, have kept all of you alive the last 2 years by filling your grocery shelves with the food that you eat.
Okay, there's more to that video, but we don't need to watch the whole thing. That's just the gist there. Media comes up.
Note that this isn't like post-debate. This is him like walking into work.
Yeah, it's literally walking into work. They ask him a very unfair question, and does that sound like a dodge? No. They ask him, how can you support the trucker protest? Because there's all sorts of bad people who did things, and that's a pretty conclusive, on-topic, to-the-point answer. And I could show you any number of clips like this. Almost all of the media clips that you can find are exactly like this. He gives an exact, on-to-the-point answer. So I don't know where Charest's even coming from with this one. It's like, it's at best projection, and it's at worst just outright lying. And I'm just perplexed.
It strikes me as like a grab bag of political attacks. Like you just shake up the bag and you reach in and you just put whatever you take out into the promotional email. Like, it's very strange. He won't take questions at events. Like, what? Didn't he offer to stay for like 4 hours to just take pictures with people?
When I was there,
event
he
that you went
said
to?
he would stay there until he had met or took a picture and talked to every single person he wanted to. Didn't even time box it. He would be there the entire day if there were people in line. And I'm sure there probably was, because it was really crowded.
I'm just bored of the laziness of these attacks,
I know.
right? Like,
That's the thing
it's
that-
just such nothing.
That's the thing that gets me. Not only are they uninspiring attacks that are false, they're like low effort. Like, he doesn't talk to the media. Like, did you do any diligence before you did this attack?
Yeah, Mad Beast makes a good point that Pierre does way more interviews outside of debates as well. He says I see a new one showing up all over the place. Like, I swear, like every day almost, he's talking to somebody new and he's posting on Facebook about like, oh, I sat down with this group in this town or whatever. Like, it's constant.
Yeah. He's done.
Who's Charest talking to?
he talked to CTV once.
CTV.
Where he did. That's the interview where he said Poilievre should be banned from the race for supporting the trucker convoy.
That was his last and only interview.
That's the only one I'm aware of. I'm sure he might have done more, but like, Poilievre's done a bunch. He's done one with True North News. He's done one with Jordan Peterson recently. Has plenty of random ones, like the one I just showed you. Like, the idea that he doesn't take media interviews or doesn't take questions is weird.
Yeah, like I said, it's just lazy. It's not even dishonest. It's just a lazy attack. It's tiring how easy it is to disprove.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if someone comes up to you with this email, it would take 2 seconds to prove them wrong, but it's like, oh my god, why do I have to do this every single time? Like, come on, guys, try a little bit harder at least. Make it a bit more interesting.
The weird thing to me, too, is Charest also talks about, like, uniting the party after this, but he's doing as much, if not more, scorched earth at campaigning than Poilievre ever did in the campaign. He's doing everything in his power to disparage and defame Poilievre. Which doesn't make any sense if you think about it, because if Charest were to win, there is a large percentage of the party that really likes Poilievre, just objectively by polling. So why would you do everything in your power to defame somebody that the majority of the party really likes? That's a terrible campaign strategy. That'd be like running against, who's a really popular politician somewhere? That'd be like running against Viktor Orban in Hungary and just every single moment defaming him, but trying to run as a right-wing Hungarian. Like, you're not going to win? You don't beat someone people really like by defaming them. You don't make... The people who like him are not going to change their minds by you defaming them. You might influence the people who have no opinion, but the people who really like him are still going to stay the same. So it's a terrible campaign strategy. In fact, I would argue Charest's doing more to harm the party's unity this way than anyone else.
I think someone in chat mentioned during the last conservative leadership debate that it seems like Charest just kind of along for the ride, like he's not even trying to win. He's just here for the fun, and then he's gonna leave.
Maybe.
That's what this strikes me as. Like, this would take an intern 2 seconds to disprove and be like, maybe we shouldn't put that in the email.
But then again, you also see people like CTV running with the Anglo-Saxon controversy, which would take 3 seconds of Googling to find out that the peers had said literally nothing wrong. It said mainstream linguistics advice, but...
What other kind of bullshit does he have for us tonight?
I lost count completely, so the next one. He won't give clear answers to simple policy questions in debates he has attended.
Oh, is that like a follow-up of like, oh, he doesn't attend debates, but when he does, he doesn't talk?
Yeah. And it's just like, excuse me? Did you watch the same debates?
From you? Were you there? Was it someone else?
He didn't.
I think he's too busy. Like, he's too busy sweating about Huawei to listen.
It's wild. Like, I don't think he. If anything, he answered more straightforward than anyone else, and more clear. But at worst case scenario, no one in debates gives clear answers most of the time, because the debate format we use in Canada is absolutely useless, no matter the federal, provincial, inter-party. Like, they don't give enough people enough time at all to speak on issues, so you don't have any meaningful time to talk. So, in this regard, Poilievre definitely gives more clear answers than Charest, but in a sense, no one can really give a good answer because you don't have enough time to even say anything.
Oh yeah, just how will you fix inflation? You get 45 seconds. And if you can't describe your entire federal plan in 45 seconds, then you're just not giving a clear answer.
Legit hack source. Personally, now I have not seen much of Brown this campaign, and I don't know him very well pre-campaign. I know he was that for a while he was the leader of the Ontario PC Party before you stepped down over a fake controversy. And by fake, I mean someone tried to smear him with a sex scandal. But other than that, I don't know too much about him. There is some... Apparently he campaigned as social conservative and decided after electing that social conservatives are a dead weight and they should go away. And he campaigned on fighting the carbon tax, and he said supporting it as soon as he won. But other than that, I don't really know much about him. So, based on my little knowledge of Brown, he seems like a smarmy, slimy politician. Whereas Charest just seems like he doesn't even want to pretend. So they both seem to be cut from a similar cloth, but Brown's at least trying to pretend. So does that make him worse or better? That really depends.
Oh, it's just... I'm sorry I'm not more engaged, but these attacks are just, like, boring.
Yes.
If you're gonna make bullshit attacks, make them interesting. Tell me that Pierre runs a multinational drug cartel and that he's being funded by Bitcoin and Elon Musk. Like, give me something to chew on a little bit if you're gonna be bullshit like this.
He's being funded by Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Bitcoin. Well, I mean, he did do that one interview in front of that really big nickel.
Yeah. That big nickel is funding his campaign.
Anon is saying Charest is against CRTC regulation, at least. Brown hasn't commented on any of it. He also attacked Pierre for the Anglo-Saxon in the French debate. Oh, the French debate. We kind of considered doing the French debate. I don't think I can translate that fast, so it didn't end up happening. But
I also don't speak any useful quantity of French, so I would have just been staring at the screen, being like, "Yep."
I mean, it would have been about the same amount of attention paid to the debates as the last two streams were, but
that's probably
at
true.
least those ones we could pretend.
Though apparently, from reading some reports about it, it was even worse debate because, unsurprisingly, 3 of the candidates spoke almost zero French. Now, the case of Baber, he has a pretty good excuse that this is his 4th language, so cut the guy some slack there. But
4th. What's the 3rd language?
Russian, Hebrew, and English, in that order, or maybe Russian, Hebrew was switched. So presumably he's a Jew, but it's nothing. Doesn't matter.
Interesting.
There's a lot of Russian Jews in Canada, actually.
Actually, I think that's most Russians in Canada. I don't know if that's true. That I could be pulling that out of my ass, but of the people I know, that's most of them.
I've known quite a few Jews in my life, and all of them have been Russian, which is interesting.
Well, I know that there was a big exodus from the Soviet Union for obvious reasons, so a lot of them ended up here.
Legit hack source, so we didn't do an Ontario debate stream, mostly because they did not line up on days that I didn't have to work the next day, and they were late enough in the evening that it was going to mess me up for work. Now, that said, we will be doing actual election night coverage next week for Ontario because I don't work next Friday.
Yes, we will be, that's Thursday night, right?
Yes.
Yes, we will be covering that. Good question. Ontario is the center of the universe.
Definitely feels like it from over here, at least what federal politicians do.
For sure.
Now, let's move on to the next one. I don't know what number we're on at all. Now, this is a long one. And I screen capped the entire email here, so I'm just going to read out the ones I think matter. And before I get into this, if on election night people are late to the stream, legit hack source, that's perfectly fine. I encourage everyone in Ontario to vote. Voting is... If you don't vote, don't complain.
Voting is more important than streams.
Yes. Or if you really have a lot of data to burn, you could just watch the stream in the lineup to vote. Don't do that unless you have like a crap load of data to burn.
Nobody in Canada has that much data to burn.
So this was an email sent by someone supporting Charest, who was given the ability to speak on his behalf. I can't think of her name. It was some woman. I think she was a politician. But I don't know. And I don't really care. So the important things to note here, I'm not gonna read the whole thing, I'm just gonna take the snippets here. So she's complaining that the Supreme Court is going to allow extreme intoxication to be defense against violent crimes such as assault and sexual violence. And then she later says that Charest is going to introduce stronger sentences for hate crimes, assaults against healthcare workers, and zero tolerance for violent criminals and gun smuggling. Now, I will be honest and straight first. Yes, 100% if people, like, I don't know the court case, and I don't really care to look it up because I don't think it really matters that much. But
I know the court cases.
Violent crime is bad. That's pretty safe to say, and tougher policies are generally a good idea. The two problems I have with this is, first off, hate crimes is a liberal, left-wing social justice thing. They're stupid entirely. The crime is not worse because of what the person doing it believes. Now, Lexie might have disagreements on this because she's more lawyery than me, but personally...
No, I'm exactly up that alley. I find the idea of hate crime legislation really stupid.
Like, the idea that you murdering someone is worse because you hated them is because of their race doesn't make sense, because to murder someone, you have to dislike them in some way. Like, you don't murder someone you love. You have to have some either mental issues, or you have to hate the person to murder them. Like, no sane person murders someone they love.
So, okay, the idea behind hate crime legislation is that a crime committed out of hatred for somebody's immutable characteristics doesn't just harm the victim of the crime, it harms the community that they're from, and that the idea behind it that has been argued, I believe, in decisions that have led to this is that it causes more damage because it causes, like, not psychological damage, but it causes societal damage to the groups that this person is associated with. But I find that to be a very toothless argument because no violent crime affects only the person who is the direct victim of the violent crime. It's always going to affect it's always going to have a ripple out to the people who are connected to that person, no matter what the reason is. So, by that alone, the idea of hate crime legislation is it creates classes of people who are more protected, basically, because in Canada, a hate crime is not just something motivated by hatred for an immutable characteristic. It has to do with the certain characteristic that you're targeting. For example, I know that this applies in human rights law when it comes to determining whether discrimination has happened, where you have to have a pre-existing disadvantage in order to be discriminated against in Canada. So, for example, a man can't argue gender-based discrimination outside of, like, super specific circumstances, perhaps, because they need to find out, like, they need to find that characteristic gives you a pre-existing disadvantage. And if they don't think you have a pre-existing disadvantage, then no matter what happened to you, it wasn't discrimination in Canada. So that kind of blows out the window. Like, in the U.S., it's a bit different because in the U.S., a hate crime can go any direction. In Canada, it can't. So they kind of double back on their own philosophy there by saying, okay, it's bad because it harms more people because of the targeting of a mutable characteristic, but we actually only care when it's certain characteristics being targeted, and we only care when it's certain groups being targeted. So it's just riddled with inconsistencies, and it's based on a premise that is fundamentally flawed, which is why I hate it. I also... It has the effect of valuing different victims of the same crimes at different weights, which is, I find, antithetical to a supposedly equal society. There's a whole list of issues wrong with it. It's a very dumb legal concept, in my opinion.
Yes. And the most important thing is the last one you said there. It violates the idea that everyone is equal under law. You're not equal under law if your crime is worse because somebody thinks you killing this person because of immutable characteristics is worse than you just killing another person. Like, a classic example, you can burn down a bunch of Catholic churches and that's fine. You burn down one mosque, you're a hate criminal. Oh, great. I'm really glad.
Yeah, and as far as I know, that's basically how it works in Canada, which is kind of fucked up, gotta say. But as for the extreme intoxication thing, so extreme intoxication is already defense for some crimes, but not all. Most notably, as of right now, I don't know if the Supreme Court has already changed this, but what I learned, because I did learn about this fairly recently, was that extreme intoxication stops being a defense for violent crimes. Anything before that, it can be a defense, but not for violent crimes. But the reasoning for that was, it wasn't like a logical conclusion from the situation. Like, I think the Supreme Court would admit that extreme intoxication can kind of remove the intent sometimes from whatever crime that you're committing. But they wanted to exclude, remove the violent crimes from that defense for policy reasons, because they don't want violent crimes to be defended against. Like, basically, the Supreme Court decided that violent crimes are so serious that even if it could logically be a defense of extreme intoxication, we don't want the defense of extreme intoxication to apply to violent crimes, because we think that violent crimes are too important to try to avoid. That's when policy reasons are a valid reason. They are a valid way to make law in court, because sometimes they say, you know what, I know that this doesn't follow from the logic, but there's an outcome that we want to avoid here, so for policy reasons, we're going to do it this way anyway. And that's valid. So this decision to go against that is basically them just switching, to my knowledge, I haven't read the case, but it seems like it's them switching from deciding on policy reasons to deciding on logical reasoning. Which, I mean, you could make a good argument for either side. This is one of those things where, like, it's not clear-cut whether it's a good or bad decision. It just depends on what your judicial goals are. If you want to decide based on policy reasons, then you would say that it's probably a bad idea to allow extreme intoxication to be a defense for violent crimes. If you want to be logically consistent in the court, you would probably think it's a good thing. So, I don't know, it's strange to me that it's being represented so one-sided, but I guess it is kind of off in the legal weeds for most people to understand, so I will let that one slide, honestly.
The other thing I want to worth noting here is the lady who writes this email, who I don't remember the name of, but it doesn't matter, talks so much about we got to make people free from violence and protecting people, increasing security, but at no point does she or Shrey say the only thing that would actually increase people's ability for safety, which is legalizing concealed carry and making our self-defense laws better. That's the only thing that the government can do to meaningfully increase someone's personal safety. I really don't want to like doing this because it's a recent horrific event, but the shooting in Texas is a perfect example why people should be able to defend themselves, because the government won't defend you.
So, speaking of which, to kind of circle back to what I said before I move on, this whole assaults against healthcare workers thing has the same problem as hate crime legislation does, where the status of the victim changes how serious the crime is. And I feel like that's also just kind of piggybacking off of COVID, where I haven't actually heard anything about an increase of assault against healthcare workers. I think that was just... It seems like it's been conjured out of thin air. If you guys have evidence to the contrary, I'd be happy to look at it, but...
I think that's because there was a couple of protests by hospitals in Ontario, and maybe there was people heckling nurses or doctors or whatever, but I'm not aware of any meaningful amounts of violence. Though, I guess if you are a social justice warrior, heckling someone is violence, so...
Love to click those links in that screenshot, because I have no idea how he's going to tackle intimate partner violence. Like, that's one of those crimes that happens without premeditation. Like, there's nothing... As far as I know, there's no law that he can make that's going to prevent intimate partner violence from happening. It can make consequences worse after the fact, but the damage has already been done.
That's the dirty secret about violent crime. Interesting anon, that according to what he says here, that clicking the link, the tackle intimate partner violence, it's pointing to a proposal that is basically identical to an NDP proposal, which...
We know what the NDP proposal is?
No, but knowing the NDP, it's probably terrible.
I'll have to look into that, but
according to a non-follow-up here, It will criminalize behavior that makes someone fear for their life, which already...
Pretty sure that's already a thing.
So if it is already a thing, that's at best nothing, like an irrelevant law, and it's at worst going to expand it to the point of farcical, which a lot of the NDP proposals seem to do. They just expand things to the point where it's inane.
I mean, I know that assessing whether someone's fear for their safety is reasonable is something the court already does when they're assessing like self-defense defenses. But
the other thing that
I don't know if making someone fear for their life is already a crime. I believe it's something you could launch a civil suit.
I'm pretty sure it's a defense for self-defense. Like,
oh, it is for sure, but it's not its own charge. Although it might be its own charge. I'm not actually sure. Like, I know that uttering threats is its own charge, but that's probably something a little bit different.
So, Mike G said here that, but isn't the counter argument that for all the ability people have to defend themselves in the U.S., it does it in practice translate into better outcomes? I don't know the statistics myself. Now, the dirty truth on this one here is that a lot of the pro-gun control people will completely ignore, or they will misrepresent with really bad statistics. That's the one common throughput with gun control advocates, is they have really malicious use of statistics, either because they're completely ignorant to how they work, or because they're malicious. Basically, in the US, there are, by most studies that, or any study that actually tries to look at defensive use of firearms, somewhere between 500,000 and 2 million uses of them in a year. And even if and most of them just involve, like, someone's trying to mug you, you flash your pistol at them and they leave you alone. So
yeah, I forget the number, but it's
completely drowns out the actual number of homicides. And I think actual homicides is only like 50,000. No, it's like 20,000 or something. It's relatively small. And you look at that too, a large percent of the homicides are just gang members shooting each other. And same thing in Canada, by the way. A significant portion of homicides are gang members shooting each other. And the way they make this sound even worse is they always use gun homicides versus like gun ownership rates, stuff like that, which is just farcical because first off, it is a truism. If you have more guns, there'll be more gun violence. But the argument for allowing self-defense and concealed carry isn't that you're going to reduce gun violence, you're going to reduce violence. Because anyone who only cares about the weapon that was used in the violence doesn't actually care about helping people. If you are concerned that there's so much gun crime in Toronto, you don't actually care about people in Toronto. Because the problem shouldn't be gun crime, it should be crime in Toronto. Or crime in Chicago. It shouldn't be gun crime.
This should all be fist crime. Then I'd be happy.
Like, you look at the United Kingdom. They make guns really hard to get. What do people use? They stab people. They throw acid at people. Their homicide rate's higher than it was in the 90s. Or, sorry, the early 2000s.
Instead of mass shootings, they just have bombings and people running cars into crowds. Like, you're always going to be able to enact violence if you want to.
This whole thing boils down to, this whole email here and the whole concept is, the idea that the state can stop someone from committing a crime. It's actually impossible. The only thing you can do is to mitigate why the crimes might happen. And all of these proposals they make don't actually do that. So how do you mitigate shootings? Well, one, you go to underprivileged areas and you actually increase the quality of life there by doing improving business in the area. I can't think of the proper term for this, but there is a type of proposal that people make, special business areas or whatever, but basically you make it easier to run businesses there. You have strict enforcement of crimes, and then you have those areas get wealthier, people get more money, crime goes down. Because one of the biggest causes of crime is abject poverty. It's not the only cause, but it's one of them. And the other thing you have to do is you have to actually punish people for committing crimes. the pathological compassion people have, where they're like, "Oh well, we got to reform the person," or they're just a young kid. They didn't mean it. That's stupid. You committed the crime. You committed the crime. Letting someone walk is not going to help.
Legit Hack Source is saying, can we just own pistols and marksman rifles and not AR-15s then in the U.S.? I mean, point me out the difference, man. I have a couple of guns in my gun safe 10 feet away from me that are functionally identical to an AR-15, but not an AR-15, so they're perfectly unrestricted, whereas the AR-15 is banned in Canada. There's no difference between them. The only thing that makes an AR-15 special is that it's, like, nice to use. It's user-friendly. Lots of parts. Like, it's a good product, and that's why they don't like it, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess basically to the point I'm making, right, is if you want to give people the ability to defend themselves, you have to increase people's safety. You have to give people the ability to defend themselves. The amount of random shootings that occur anywhere in the world is non-consequential.
Yeah, so it is worth noting that stuff like mass shootings in the States or in Canada, although in Canada ours did not get nearly as much attention, but the reason that they seem like such a big problem is because they are so sensationalized, when it is like a minute, tiny little fraction of homicides. They are possibly especially tragic, especially when it happens in schools and such like that, but I would invite you to consider the fact that a lot of mass shootings happen in places where defensive use of firearms is made more difficult. For example, a lot of them are in schools, where obviously guns aren't allowed. And where, they're targeting children who wouldn't have guns in the first place. They're going after people who are the most defenseless that they can find. So it's not so much that an increase of ability to defend yourself in the States isn't helping. It's that they choose their targets very wisely to make sure that they are the least capable of defending themselves, even with all the advantages that the U.S. has.
The other thing worth noting, too, in the case of the most recent mass shooting in Canada, the one in Portapique, Nova Scotia, this was never made news, like mainstream national news, because it goes against the Liberals' narrative. But the people of Portapique wanted self-defense laws and gun ownership laws relaxed because they didn't feel like the RCMP was protecting them, because obviously the RCMP wasn't protecting them. It abjectly failed in every way, shape, and form. So they wanted the ability to have their own rifles to defend themselves. That is what the actual victims, or the survivors, said. Didn't make
especially in a rural area like Portapique, or like even where I live.
It doesn't have to be a rural area, though. Like the most recent shooting in Texas, they were there. The police just didn't go in.
No, but that's true. But in a rural area, like, it's not like the resources are there and not being used. The resources just aren't there. If something starts going on outside my house, it's going to be 30 minutes before any police can get here. Like, I'm out of luck until then, right?
Yeah.
So especially in such a spread out place as Canada, where police resources are so thinly spread, like, it is very important.
Yeah, like this entire... And the other thing to keep in mind, too, because the writer of this email is very specifically talking about women's safety. Now, you don't know this because you can't see myself and or Lexie, but I'm significantly bigger than Lexie, like most men are to girls.
Mm-hmm.
That's normal. The only conceivable way that Lexie would be to stop me from hurting her if I wanted to, not that I ever would, but for sake of argument, let's say I did, is if she had a weapon. Now, there's statistics for this. If you have two people who are both untrained noobs at fighting, the person who is 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier will win 99% of the time. If they are both equally trained, the person who's 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier in unarmed combat will win 99% of the time. If the victim, who's smaller, is like a black belt in any martial art you want to pick, and the other person is just a generic guy, the bigger person will win 70% of the time. That's why MMA has weight classes, for example. You bring up a weapon like a knife, it's about 70% of the time the bigger person is going to win. Because keep in mind, to kill someone or disable someone with a knife involves stabbing them dozens of times. It only takes one grab of the wrist for the bigger, stronger person to disable your stabbing ability.
Yeah, and I mean, I harp on this a lot because I'm a firm believer that self-defense, especially with firearms, like, that is a women's issue. If there are any women's issues left in the world, that's it. That is probably my only hope. I'm a small woman. I'm about 100 pounds. Like, I'm tiny. But Chris isn't, like, he's bigger than me, but it's not like he's a foot taller than me and 100 pounds heavier. He's not that much taller than me. He's heavier than me. He's not that much taller than me. It doesn't take a lot of a size difference to make a significant difference, especially when you're talking about between a man and a woman. Because even a man the same size as me, I'm gonna have a hard time dealing with myself.
Yeah, men on average have, I believe, 20% more muscle mass than women.
Yeah, it's kind of insane, honestly, because I know a couple of guys that are about my size, and it's like, whoa, like, not even close. But, like, self-defense is a women's issue. And, for example, intimate partner violence, that might be your only chance. If you're in a domestic abuse situation, your ability to defend yourself is probably going to determine whether you survive that altercation or whether you don't. Like, that's you are your first and your final line of defense. If I'm being attacked by, a man somewhere or anybody, that altercation is going to be over probably in less than a minute. Police can't get to me in that time. I'm the only person available to protect myself. And if they want, like, she says right here in the email, where is it? Damn, where is it? No woman should fear taking public transit or walking home alone at night, but we do. I wouldn't if I had a handgun on me. I would feel, you should still be cautious, but I would feel a hell of a lot more secure out in public by myself, out at night, stuff like that, if I had the ability to defend myself. But in Canada, where you're not even allowed to own pepper spray, they make it very difficult to defend yourself as a woman, and it makes you more vulnerable, and it pisses me off. I find that to be an incredibly important women's issue. And I don't find a lot of things to be women's issues.
And the other thing worth noting here is that if you're talking about, so you both bring a gun, it's at worst 50-50 for the victim. But oftentimes, the victim, if they're trained, and you always should be trained if you're carrying a gun, just because if you're going to have to use it, you want to be able to use it. If you're actually trained and ready to use it, the victim is probably going to be actually at an advantage because the other person is not expecting it. Because even in places where it's legal, most people don't actually carry.
Let's see. We got some chat going on here.
Yeah.
Rocco says, sorry for saying this. It is very sad to have any mass shootings, but it is getting old because the left and the media are making it an end-of-the-world issue. It's getting old from the left and the media. We've got a bit of an exchange here, so I'm going to go through the exchange first and then give my response to it. Mike says, I get your point, but it was the end of the world for 21 people and probably feels like it for all the people close to them. The rest, that's about course of control. I'll get to that in a second and on. But, you both have good points, but it's... You're both looking at this issue from different perspectives. So, I have to agree with Rocco. Like, it is getting old, especially when you think about the fact that a lot of the reason that these shootings keep happening is because they get so much attention in the media. Like, that's exactly what shooters want when they commit a crime like this. They want their name to be in the news 24 hours a day for a couple of weeks, and they want to, like, make their statement on the world, and that's how they do it. Actually, if you guys, the Daily Wire made an excellent movie that showcases, like, these characteristics of mass shootings that liberals would prefer that we forget. It's called Run, Hide, Fight. Excellent movie. Really good action movie. Even if you're not interested in the political message, I highly recommend it. Really good acting. Great movie. But, it is, when you look at all crime, especially in the United States with such a gigantic population, it is nothing. It's nothing. It's statistically almost insignificant. The amount of crime in the United States that is the mass shooting. It's just that it's the most shocking to hear about, but it is not a statistically significant type of crime.
It is also a type of crime that is, more than all others, actually impossible to prevent. Because if you want to commit mass murder, let's say it's literally impossible to get a gun. One of the worst terrorist attacks in history was a guy in a truck in Marseille, France, and I believe he killed 108 people with a truck.
I mean, a dude ran over a Muslim family in Toronto with a truck, like, not that long ago. It doesn't take very much to be able to kill a lot of people very quickly.
Yeah. Mass killings should not be what policy is based on, because it's actually impossible to prevent a mass killing. The sick person will always commit it.
And they'll probably die in the process as well, so there's not even anything after the fact that you can do by making a new law.
Only thing you can do is make it so that it's it's going to be less bad. Or possibly you can stop some of the attempts mid-attempt before it gets bad. Like, in the case of this
Which is where self-defense comes in.
The case of this most recent one in Texas, if they had a teacher with a gun or a police officer at the school who was able to shoot and kill the person quickly enough, that would have ended the tragedy. He still would have started it. There's nothing you can do to stop that, but it would have mitigated it. That's all you can do.
Yeah, and Rocco's saying it's very true and sad, but the media making bigger and bigger every time. At some point, the people will feel and think the boy's crying about a wolf, and we know what happens. It does make you kind of like, I heard about it, and I kind of went, my first reaction was, oh my god, Twitter's not going to shut up about this. Like, it makes you desensitized to it when the media harps on something too much.
Oh, most people I know's reaction to me, it's like, another one? And they're not even that, like, again, they're not even that common. And the fact it's like, everyone's reaction is, it's going to be in the news every single day now.
So here's the thing, like, and Mike has a point, you know, it is the end of the world for the people who are involved in that and their families, but so is every violent crime. You know, a run-of-the-mill street murder that doesn't even get a story in the local newspaper is the end of the world for a great number of people around the victim of that crime. A suicide is the end of the world for those people, you know. It's, anytime you have, you know, an unnecessary death, it's terribly tragic, but it's not smart to make law based on what's tragic. You need to make law based on what's possible. And so, you know, it's terrible to hear about, but sensationalizing it is only going to make the problem worse. And this polarization of the political sphere that happens around it, it's unproductive and often counterproductive to fixing the issue. For example, how self-defense could be greatly beneficial in a lot of mass shooting situations. And we've seen active shooter situations that have been diffused by some random passerby that happened to be carrying that day and put a stop to it before it became a giant news story. But you don't hear about those because no tragedy ends up happening.
Yeah.
So it's also kind of like a self-perpetuating, or no, it's, what would you call that? Not confirmation bias, but it's like, you know, anytime that, you know, some kind of sensible self-defense policy puts a stop to one of these things, you're never going to hear about it because nothing bad happened. Because it was stopped before it occurred.
What is the word for that? That's, it's like for lack of a better term, it's survivorship bias. But, like,
yeah, it's
inverse of the survivorship. So, you only hear about the things that actually are bad.
So, for example, you know, they say, we need to stop this from happening. You know, this can't happen anymore. We need to stop these things from happening. But then, in the cases where an active shooter does try to start something, and some passerby with a gun puts a stop to the situation, you're never going to hear about that. You will only ever hear about it when it doesn't get stopped.
The other thing that's worth noting, too, is in a lot of cases, especially in Canada, it's not even... I personally support liberalizing gun laws so people can defend themselves with firearms. But it's not even just that. Like, just making self-defense easier is a big hand, because there are many instances that you can point to if you look into it of people stopping, like, a terror attack. And frankly, these mass shootings are terrorist attacks. All these people are politically motivated. All of them. So, they are terrorist attacks.
They often do it... I'm sorry, I have to put this in here. If you read, like, the things that they say before they commit these crimes, they're doing it because they know that it's going to be a media shitstorm and because it's going to cause all this political unrest. They do it exactly for this reason, which is why they need to stop paying attention to it, as bad as it sounds. They're only making this problem worse by sensationalizing it and turning it into a political debate, because that's precisely why they do it.
But yeah, you can't even find cases of places where a terrorist attack is stopped because a brave person intervened. There was that one famous case in the United Kingdom. I don't know what United Kingdom's defense laws, self-defense laws are like, but Fortunately, in this case, the man didn't get charged with crime, but they were at a post-jail reform session, or whatever you call that, and this Muslim terrorist has a suicide vest on and is trying to do, presumably, a terror attack. And this Polish guy with a narwhal tusk and a couple other bystanders engage in to stop this man before he can actually commit a terror attack. And it's also worth noting this person was released on parole, even though he was arrested for planning a terror attack. So it's kind of dumb, but that's neither here nor there. So
that's a whole UK issue.
It's not even just the case that you need a gun for this. It's just you need to allow people, brave, for lack of a better term, heroes, to actually be able to go in and defend themselves. And in Canada, that's just not a thing. Like, the self-defense laws in Canada are so stringent that I would be afraid to intervene to help somebody who's getting attacked for getting charged if I hurt the person that started the confrontation. Which is not something anyone should be proud of.
Rocco says, saw charts saying US and Canada are not even in the top 10 in the world with mass shootings per year. I'm not saying it's not an issue, but one issue is give teachers training with firearms and self-defense, yeah? And also, Rocco wants you to know, Chris, that he's sorry for all those comments on Canada's polling divergence video. I assume you know what he's talking about.
I do know what he's talking about, and don't be sorry. I love comments. Always comment.
He does. He sends them to me. He gets very excited when he gets comments.
Well, also worth noting on Rocco's point there, I don't know the exact number, and it might be a bit changed now, but when I originally saw this a couple years ago, there was a point that of mass shooting victims per capita on average per year, the US was, I don't even think it was in the top 5, and it was actually Norway that was number 1 at the time of that statistics being created. It might be slightly different now, obviously, because I believe it's been like 5 years since I saw that. But it does go to show that you see a lot of instances of it happening in the US, but it doesn't. That's not because of guns.
Circling back to Anon's comments about the intimate partner violence thing. If you had a bad week and punched a wall to vent, that could meet the criteria for, quote, causes the person to fear on reasonable grounds on more than one occasion that violence will be used against them. According to the Coercive Control Bill C-247, which failed to pass, it doesn't take much to go to jail. This is the concept Sheree wants to bring back. Yeah, I
see Sheree takes Amber Heard's side of the trial.
I've been, like, purposely avoiding that whole shit show, to be honest, but... Yeah,
just to interrupt you, I just want to make this note because I found it was really funny. One of Amber Heard's main defense points is at one point Depp was having a freak out and was like punching a wall and breaking cabinets, and he's like, he's making me fear for myself. And what caused Depp's freak out here is he's found out that his finance manager had embezzled $625 million of his money.
He has $625 million to embezzle? Holy shit.
Apparently, that's what I was reading in an article about it. And it's just like...
God damn.
If you don't get upset that someone embezzled $625 million from you, you're a psychopath. You have no emotions.
Yeah, that's one... Yeah, I can kind of... So there's a couple of crimes out there. I'm not usually a fan of criminalizing behavior where no actual harm has been done. Although, it's worth noting that... the courts in Canada don't think that harm is a necessary component to crimes, and I don't necessarily disagree with that because there's a whole shit ton of different crimes. But when we're talking about, like, interpersonal, like, person A attacks person B, those kinds of crimes, right? I'm not usually a fan of criminalizing something, like, before it even happens. Now, sometimes you have things like uttering threats where it's basically trying to prevent an attack before it happens by making the threat itself an actionable offense, which is fair enough, but shit like this, it gets way too close to being able to put, factually innocent people in prison, and I'm never a fan of inching towards that because I always think the government will take advantage of that to the fullest extent, and that it'll just generally be used maliciously. It's kind of like red flag laws in that sense, but yeah, it's a shitty way to make a law is basically what I'm saying. Like, I agree with you.
Rocco, just to quickly answer your question, basically, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp were in a relationship at some point, like celebrities do. Do not look for celebrities for relationship advice. They're terrible at it. And Amber Heard publicly accused Depp of domestic violence, and Depp claimed he wasn't doing this, so he is suing Amber Heard for defamation. So they're having a defamation lawsuit right now. And I'm not a lawyer, but it really looks like Amber Heard is going to lose and possibly might get charged with perjury afterwards because she's lied on stand, like openly. But that's not the topic of this. And if you want to learn more about this, I would recommend going to someone else because I don't follow it very closely. It just, the amount of news content I consume, I just learn a lot about it just by virtue of reading the news, of that. I don't intentionally.
I've been personally, I've been purposely avoiding it because thinking about court stuff is making me nauseous because I'm still recovering from my first year of law school, so that's why I haven't been paying attention to it.
Now, all that said, we had a lot of discussion on this one part of email, but let's go to the next one, and I believe this one's number 9. Poilievre, or only answer to the inflation crisis to encourage you and your loved ones to invest your life savings in innovate cryptocurrency to opt out of inflation. So first, based off of previous segments or video clips I posted here, probably have never said to invest your life savings in crypto at all. That's just blatantly not true. And
what fucking garbage. Come on, this is so lazy.
And even if it... I don't think it's damaging enough to count for defamation, but I'm pretty sure Poilievre, if it was damaging or disparaging, could easily win a defamation case over this. But I don't think it's disparaging enough. I think the court would just be like, whatever. But, this is clearly with intent of malice to try to harm Poilievre. I just don't think anyone considers it disparaging enough. But regarding the inflation point, I have another clip segment to you. I'm showing the wrong video clip here. Is it this one? Yes.
How are we going to take care of the overinflation?
We're going to stop printing money, phase out the deficit, and cut the inflationary taxes that are driving up the cost of living. So,
quick 10 seconds, not a lot, but straight from the horse's mouth. That's what he's going to do to fight inflation. Okay.
I'm sorry. I can't take this seriously. I'm just really enjoying this mental image of Poilievre, behind a building in a trench coat, hey kids, invest all your life savings into crypto. I swear it'll work. What the fuck? Oh, it's so good.
It's such a weird position to be in. It's you are just blatantly lying. Why? Is your campaign so bad? Is your record charade so weak that you can't even, make a real attack on Poilievre? And again, I personally like Poilievre, but there are things you can critique him on. You might not like his rhetoric. You might not like, or not, that's the wrong phrase. You might not like how he does his rhetoric, or you might think he's oversimplifying things. I think these are legitimate criticisms. Bernier also made a legitimate one on housing where he argued that just building houses isn't the solution because we're importing too many immigrants. That is legitimate criticism. You can disagree or agree with that all you want, but saying regarding inflation that Poilievre is telling you to invest in crypto, that's just a lie. And inflation crisis is easy to solve. Anyone who's taken any economics is trivial. Inflation is increasing monetary supply. So stop printing money and stop spending government money. Reduce government spending and reduce printing. Easy. So
Annan says that if Poilievre was selling Bitcoin behind a building, that he would like him more.
That would be kind of funny. You just have
open
your trench coat and there's tablets here and there's set up with your thumb scan. You can log in.
Hey kid, plug this into your computer. You'll mine Bitcoin. It'll be great.
Let's go on to number 10, though. There wasn't too much to say about that one. So here we have, I'm supporting Jean Charest because he continues to propose substantive policies to look to the future, policies rooted in conservative values, and are relevant to Canadians. If you haven't seen his platform, click here. So I've been to his website. I've looked at all his platform issues. at best, you could describe them as moderate fiscal conservatism. He's not talking about like meaningfully cutting government spending or meaningfully cutting taxes, just trimming around the edges. So it's not that fiscally conservative. And again, I've mentioned this before in other videos, but at a certain point, fiscal conservatism is actually contrary to social liberalism. You can't be fiscally conservative and socially liberal at a certain point, because in the case of Canada, if you are 100% fiscally conservative, you would abolish the healthcare system we have. So you can't be a full fiscal conservative and support our current healthcare system. It is a contradiction.
Based.
As long as you have a legitimate reason that you feel like you can argue, there's a lot of positions you can hold. I don't like simplifying things down to this is the only position you can have. But if you're describing yourself as a fiscal conservative, like a true full fiscal conservative, you can't actually support public healthcare or a bunch of other things. You can say you are mostly a fiscal conservative. I would agree with that. It's like, as another analogy to the US here, it's like Nancy Pelosi going around saying she's a Catholic. Well, no, you don't agree with any canon law, or big canon laws, so you're not a Catholic. It's the same kind of thing. Like, you can say you like fiscal conservatism, but you can't say you are supporting or you are a fiscal conservative, if that makes sense. And again, they always say in these conservative values, he doesn't, like, what conservative values? What are you conserving, Sheree?
I mean, that just speaks to the weirdness of calling up an ideological perspective conservatism, but I think we've gone over that enough that we don't need to get into that again. Rocco's saying, if Charest wins the leadership, he will split the party in half or more, and that will give Trudeau 4 more years. What do you think?
I don't actually know if he'll split the party in half. I think it will just delete the party. I'll be honest, I don't know. Like, right now, my model has Poilievre and Lewis collectively at about 60%. I don't think that 60% would vote for a party led by Charest. In fact, unless Poilievre loses utterly, like, I'm talking knocked out in, like, the first round kind of thing. If he loses in, like, the 5th round, like Bernier did in 2017, I fully expect Poilievre to leave the party with about half the Conservative MPs right now. I think you'll see 55 MPs just walk, probably more. In fact, actually, I could see Bergen herself leaving as well. She hasn't officially endorsed anybody. You might see 60, 70 Conservative MPs just walk out of the party if Poilievre loses. A narrow loss. If he's completely defeated, like first round defeated, maybe not. But there's just no scenario where he's going to be the first one out. So, if he loses and Charest wins, I don't think it's the party's going to split in half. I just think the People's Party is going to become the Conservative Party. And yes, Rocco, you beat you to it. If Charest wins, I think Poilievre and a lot of the Conservative MPs are just going to join the People's Party. Now, the only possible contention is there might be some, like, butting heads between, like, Bernier, but assuming people swallow their pride, I think it would be People's Party, but maybe another party would be made. I don't know, call it the True Conservative Party. Anything to add to this, Lex?
I mean, honestly, I think you've covered it. The ins and outs of party breakdown is a bit more your field than mine. So I'm content to just let you cover that. If that's... let's see. Legit Haxer says, I would vote for the Conservatives no matter who wins, but if Poilievre leaves and creates something like the Reform Party, I would vote that. Don't know if I would vote PPC. Yeah, that's the frustrating thing. Like, you kind of... If you don't want Trudeau, you kind of have to vote for the Conservatives.
Well, you do have to...
Even if it's some idiot like Charest, who's basically Liberals but blue.
I'm going to push back on that. Nothing Charest has done has convinced me he will govern an iota differently than Trudeau. Maybe, to be generous, he'll be slightly better at what Trudeau's doing. But I don't like what Trudeau's doing. I don't care. My problem with Trudeau isn't that he's doing things inefficiently. I just don't like anything he's doing. And to me, unless Charest somehow manages to convince me otherwise, I just do not trust that he's going to act any differently than Trudeau. You look at this in places like the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson is not acting any differently than the Labour Party. They have different rhetoric, but are they acting any differently? No. So what's the point of voting for Boris Johnson? There's nothing. Which is why you see the UK Conservatives getting absolutely trashed right now.
Chris, I'll let you handle Rocco's comment. I'm going to be right back.
Okay. So Rocco said, it is an exciting times to be a Canadian and Conservatives because I feel and think a lot of people are waking up to the damage to the left. I just hope that the people we vote for, or going to vote, Poilievre, Trump, Le Pen, etc., they're more center and conservative mind, to bring back our freedoms and strengthen our economy, to fix the past damages and build. Yeah, the 200 character limit's really annoying, Rocco. But, yeah, so I generally, I believe, agree with you. Like, you can point to different pros and cons of different candidates and how they're saying things and how they do things and their effectiveness. But generally speaking, my position on this is, unless there's no point to having multiple party democracy if every party agrees what the best way to the future is. If the difference between the Conservatives and the Liberals is the Conservatives are saying we will do what the Liberals are doing, but we will be better at it, there's no point to the Conservative Party. It doesn't need to exist. It's irrelevant. And at best, it's controlled opposition. The point of a multi-party democracy, and I think everyone should support this, left, right, up, down, left, north, W, whatever. The point of multi-party democracy is you're going to have at least two parties who have contrasting views on what the future should be. If your party doesn't have a coherent vision that is different than the other guy, it shouldn't exist. And what we're seeing in the US with Trump and now generally the MAGA movement, or in places like France with Le Pen and Zemmour, is you're seeing right-wing politicians emerge who genuinely don't think the future is the same, like what the future should be is the same as what centrist or left-wing candidates think the future should be. The problem with the US right now, and a lot of people, like people comment about how there's so much polarization, there's so much political division. The problem isn't that. The problem is people don't want to accept that other people have different opinions of what the future should be. Everyone should accept that. It doesn't mean you have to like what the other person's opinion of what the future is. You don't have to like them. But you have to respect that they don't agree with you. And then you collectively will work towards something. You might not be collaborating, but let's say, let's use the US as an easy example. So the Republicans right now very much do not like abortion at all. They never did. They never have. So they are slowly putting restrictions on it. The Democrats want all abortions possible, so they're slowly removing restrictions from it. These are two contrasting views of the future. Some people argue that this is bad. I think this is a good thing, because generally speaking, one view of the future is going to be wrong. Right now, I would argue progressives are wrong, but that's why I'm not progressive. But at some point in the future, it is conceivable that if people I like, let's say Poilievre, or Poilievre-like people, have been in power for 20, 30 years, they will be corrupt, established, and complacent, and now their opposition might have good points on how to fix make things better for the future. That is always something you have to consider. And you see this a lot with right now with the liberals in the US, in Canada, and the Democrats in the US, where they're saying you're destroying our democracy by opposing us or disagreeing with us. No, they are actively destroying the democracy by getting upset that someone's disagreeing with them.
Well, it is their democracy, which means
but
their way.
The point of democracy, right, is that you disagree with each other. You look at the Federalist Papers, the entire design of democratic government, because modern democratic government, for better or worse, what's the word for this? Idea-wise, originates with the American Revolution, and their argument for democratic government is that you will have the major factions in a country, they will control parties, or they'll be factions, and they will fight each other.
And it will be beautiful.
And that is the view of the government, and how it should work. So what's going on in the US right now is actually democracy working, and what's going on in Canada right now is actually democracy not working. Because we do not have two real parties. At least under O'Toole, we did not have a real other party. The NDP, the Greens, the Liberals, they're all the same party, effectively, just different colors. The Bloc don't care because Bloc want to leave Canada, so whatever. And the Conservatives historically have been weak fops.
Rocco says, I work with people who are my friends and are NDP voters. We will talk about politics and we share our opinions on issues. However, we realize that we have the right to share them and hear the other side of it. I mean, most of my friends are diehard progressives. You don't... The mistake that's being made here, especially in the States, but also... You know what? No, not even especially in the States, because it is just as bad in Canada, almost, if not worse. But is that, you know, somehow your political leanings reflect on, like, your worth as a person, which is just not the case. And people with radically different political views can you can coexist perfectly fine.
I am a strong believer that as long as you and you should be friends with people of different political views of you. Because if you only associate people that think the same way, you won't hear different ideas. And the important thing is you need to actually hear different ideas. And this is really the only flaw with the internet, is it's very easy to only give yourself ideas of one perspective. Because you don't actually make good government by only having one idea. There's a word we call that. It's yes men. The problem with kings or dictators is they associate themselves with only yes men. The problem with a lot of democratic governments is all the ministers are yes men. You don't want your friends to be yes men. You want to have civil but honest disagreement with them. Because not everyone's going to have the same brain, first off. And not everyone's going to have the same knowledge and the same personality and the same preferences and the same whatever. And the point of a democracy isn't that we can make something that's good for everybody, but we can make something that everyone's okay with. And right now, I find a lot of Western democracies just don't care about what everyone's okay with, and they just trample over everything because it's progressive or bust.
Yeah.
Word.
What else we got from Sheree?
Now we are going to go to... This is the last one of his quotes I have. Asked specifically about the liberal ban on some 1,500 models of assault-style firearms. This is not from an email, by the way. He said, I'm not seeking to change the laws as they are.
That's the most effective Poilievre criticism yet.
What?
But I think for
no,
maybe
this
a
is
reason
Sheree.
that...
This is what Sheree said.
Oh, god damn it. I thought this was like Sheree talking about Poilievre.
No. I misled this one. This is something Sheree said. This is a quote from Sheree.
I mean, you know, apex conservative right here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you really believe in conservative values, Sheree? And you completely fine with the government just arbitrarily banning and seizing the property of thousands and thousands of Canadians for no coherent reason? Very conservative of you. One of the only things that I think can define, or one of the main things that defines conservatism is the respect of private property. If you don't respect...
You tripped on the first hurdle,
If you don't respect private property, like, if you're not a private property absolutist, you're not a conservative at all. You can't even put the hat on. That's like saying you support abortion as a Catholic. You're not really a Catholic. You can't be. It's against the doctrine of the church. You can't be that. You cannot be a conservative if you don't think private property...
Scotsman.
It's not a no true Scotsman. It's just,
I know.
It's the basis of the position. If you don't completely support private property, you're not that.
Yeah, that's kind of like the first hurdle that he fell at right there.
Yeah. And it's like, the other big problem with this, and this is my big problem with Sheree overall, is he just completely accepts the narrative from the Liberals, not even challenging it at all. Like, why would I support you as a leader of the party if you're just going to completely accept the Liberal narrative? How are you defend the Liberals? Why shouldn't I vote for Trudeau?
It's not like that is... I don't know, has there ever been such a large-scale confiscation of private property? I know that they haven't gone through with the actual confiscation yet, but that's where it ends. And it's not even like that's where it ends. Like, that's what it is. They just haven't actually enacted it yet.
Yeah. I don't think there's any other examples in Canadian history that I'm aware of. Well, I'll rephrase that. You might be able to argue that early colonial days there was some with natives, but that's not something I know enough about to comment on. I've just heard that argument before.
Rocco says, feels like when I get on your stream, I start to take full control of it. I'm sorry, and I hope the viewers know they can still comment. Don't feel bad, Rocco. I also personally recently started streaming, and like the worst thing that can happen to a streamer is a dead chat. So having someone there that keeps talking, that's actually really helpful. So don't feel bad about that.
It's always better to have comments than it is not to have comments.
Mike says he's mostly just listening and digesting. Fantastic. Equally valid way to enjoy a stream. Rocco says Sheree is like an old record player and it sounds bad, and another one gets headaches.
Yeah. My general sense here is, with regarding chat stuff, is just chat whatever you want. But I particularly like if you have any comments, criticism, critique. If you disagree with me, even better. Now, obviously, because of how this works, it's very difficult for you to have a proper argument because YouTube limits me to 200, or limits this to 200 characters. Curse you, Susan, whatever her name is, Wojcicki.
Wiki? I think you said it right the first time, actually. That was good.
I'm pretty sure I pronounced that wrong, actually, because she's Polish, I believe, but whatever. That might be the Anglicization of her name, I think. That said, if you can manage to fit it in 200, love to read it. And if you can't, I mean, you can always comment on the live stream afterwards when we're done. And I will look at it again. Comments are great.
Comments are great. Is that the end of our Sheree quotes?
Yeah, that's the end of the Sheree quotes. There might be more, but these are... I didn't want to make the entire stream just that. We're already at 2 hours of this, which is more than I thought,
Yeah, this is actually... For those of you just coming in, this is a very new format because this is just topics that came up during the week that we're talking about. Yeah. Good evening, some guy. How are you doing? Good to see you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, forgive any rough edges. This is new. This is a new thing.
Yeah, we're trying to polish this out here, trying to make this. We're both new to live streams, so. Rocco says, I do disagree with you on the Canada's polling and saying I think O'Toole was a sacrificial sheep. So, you'll have to forgive me. I do not remember the exact wording of your comment, and I don't have the capacity. I guess I could technically pull it up right now. Bear with me.
You can go find it.
Lexie, you entertain them while I find the exact quote so I can refresh myself.
Oh boy. It's funny, I just started streaming a completely different topic, so I guess it's good practice. But, I know that... Well, Chris loves getting comments. He sends me screenshots of almost all of them. Especially when people are complimenting the thumbnails that I make. But that's mostly for my benefit, which thank you everybody who's done that. It's funny, the splash screen today was completely, like, kind of a quick and dirty job, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. But, Rocco, which polling video was that on? Because I know that you leave comments on a lot of videos, and that's greatly appreciated. Oh, Mike says, Lexie, resident legal expert. Oh God, I wouldn't say that. The talk in the on courts being a body that influences law and policy reminded me of the Shin versus Martinez Ramirez ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court the other day. Have you heard of it? I have not heard of it, but I'm gonna look it up. That's Shin v. Martinez Ramirez. Is that like a double last name? That's weird. Oh, Shin v. Ramirez. Okay. Ruling in Shin v. Ramirez, Justice Clarence Thomas declared for the 6 conservative members of the court that neither man was entitled to federal review of the evidence that they have been unconstitutionally convicted and condemned as a result of their lawyers. Oh, it was about shit lawyers. Okay, I haven't heard of that case, but that's very interesting. I think I should read that up a little bit. Oh, it was a dispute about arbitration. I don't know enough about arbitration to really comment, especially not American arbitration. But a very, very interesting legal issues come up when you talk about the incompetence of your lawyer, especially in an adversarial system, because that's actually one of the critiques of the adversarial system is that. Now, I'm a supporter of the adversarial system. I don't think it's perfect, but there is no legal system that's out there that's better, especially since the main competitor, at least in the Western world, is the inquisitorial system, which is fucking garbage. And I could go into that if you guys are interested, but the main critique of the adversarial system of justice, which is, you know, the classic North American courtroom where you have two sides and they're fighting and then the judge decides who wins, is that if you get a shit lawyer, you're probably going to lose. And so when it comes to people accusing their lawyers of not necessarily purposefully losing, because that's, at least in Canada, you can get disbarred if you kind of intentionally half-ass a case. Like, you are required to put in your best effort to every case that you take on. But disputes about incompetence of lawyers causing consequences. I know in Canada, that's actually a cause for civil action. You can sue your lawyer for probably not as much money as the States for sure, but probably quite a bit of money. You can sue your lawyer for basically being shit at their job. It's technically a negligence claim. But the result is that you're suing them for being shit at their job and for causing you consequences based on that. So it seems like this was a dispute about arbitration to looking for federal review of evidence. So I feel like that's probably going to move on to a civil suit against the lawyers for that. But that's interesting. I don't know enough about arbitration to understand too much about that side of the case, but you know, when it comes to lawyers being garbage, that's always a fun topic. Marco says, Lexie, what do you think of my comments on Chris's video? It was on the last Canadian polling video. I know Chris is trying to find it. I don't think he sent me that particular one. He doesn't send me every single comment.
I can send that to you now. Let me just get a screenshot.
I will read it and get back to you, Rocco. Yeah, so, Mike, American court rulings are kind of fascinating to me because despite being similar on the surface, our legal systems are actually extremely different. So, like, a lot of it's kind of gibberish to me. It's very funny. Okay, Rocco, I'm just gonna read your comment on that video out loud. And you said you think the Conservatives let O'Toole win to use him as a sacrificial sheep because you said the Conservatives winning 2021 would have been terrible politically since they would have taken the blame for inflation, the housing market, the coming recession, and food shortages. I just thought that when I read your reply and set a thought in my mind. That's an interesting take, Rocco, but the flaw that I see in it is that that would assume that the Conservatives at the time that O'Toole was running could see the future. Because that all took place before any of this kind of started crashing down. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but COVID was the major triggering event that, all of these problems were brewing, but COVID really made them explode. And that federal race happened pre-COVID, like just pre-COVID. So they would have to know the future to know that, like, to make that kind of 4D chess move, which would be cool, but I don't think is reality.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is I do think a lot of the big hitters, such as Poilievre, didn't run in 2020 because they didn't think Trudeau could lose. Because he was doing not amazing in the polls, but the Conservatives weren't doing he wasn't doing bad enough that the Conservatives could reasonably have won.
Yeah, I'm still kind of shocked that Trudeau was doing so well at that point. But I guess that was shortly before everything came crashing down. But, still, come on. Aren't you guys tired of it? Yeah. Although, come to think of it, I say that, but in the same breath, I can't really... Maybe it's just because COVID overshadowed everything, but I can't really remember any particularly bad public, gaffes, for lack of a better term, that Trudeau had made before the 2019 election.
The India trip.
But I do remember being flabbergasted that anyone still supported him, but I don't remember exactly why. Chris?
Sorry?
Do you remember what was the hot thing that Trudeau had done in 2019 that got everybody mad at him?
That was the SNC-Lavalin scandal.
Really? I thought that was earlier than that. My goodness, 2019 was a long time ago.
Scheer very nearly won. If the election was June, he probably would have won.
Wow.
That one summer recess. Blackface came out in the campaign and on. But yeah, that was a pretty big deal, actually. Frankly,
I remember the blackface. I remember hearing about that on the bus.
The hypocrisy of leftists, and I was in Ottawa at the time working for the federal government. Terrible choice. Do not recommend being a federal bureaucrat. Maybe if you're in a smaller town, it's not as bad, but if you're in a federal bureaucrat in Ottawa, it's awful. You're just a cog. You're treated as a cog, basically. But the lengths that the bureaucrats I was working with were going to rationalize why it was okay that he was doing blackface was hilarious. And these were all ethnic minorities, by the way. Or racial minorities, even, who were doing this. So just you guys would be so mad if this was conservative. But you're just completely rationalizing away that it's fine that a liberal did it.
So this is a funny story, actually. The way that I heard about that, I remember I was at school the day that this happened. And the way that I heard about that was that one of my friends sent me, I'm sure you guys have seen this picture. They took that picture of Trudeau in the the Aladdin costume, and they put it over the Yu-Gi-Oh card, the Dark Magician. And someone just sent me that picture, and I was like, wow, that's a hilarious Photoshop. And then it turned out that it was fucking real, and I was absolutely, because people were like, did your prime minister do blackface? And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound true. Oh, how wrong I was. It was fucking hilarious. Let's see. Just a new approval poll for Trudeau
Here's the photo for those curious.
Oh, you found it. It's so good.
Just our prime minister, ladies and gentlemen.
Have you seen? Let me send you the Dark Magician picture so that you can put that up on stream, because that's way too good. Oh my gosh. I find this from time to time. Oh, there's multiple angles of that picture. That's hilarious. I didn't know that. I thought there was just the one. There's many. Yeah, here we go.
Some guy said I was going to go out for Halloween in blackface and tell people I'm the PM.
Didn't someone do that for, oh no, you know what it was? At that big Virginia gun rally where absolutely nothing happened, there was a black guy walking around declaring that he was Ralph Northam in blackface. Oh fuck, that was good.
This is
there's the Dark Magician. Someone sent me someone sent me that picture. And that's how I found out.
So, Rocco just said in chat that just a new approval poll for Trudeau is at 39%. Now,
that's all you need to win in Canada. Oh my god.
That's actually more than enough. You win in Canada?
That's way more than enough.
The important thing to note with approval is approval, especially in Canada, doesn't matter. Neither does disapproval. None of that matters. All that matters is that the people who support you are concentrated in areas that will win seats. That's why the NDP does awful and the Liberals do amazing in elections. Their voters, they have catered themselves to a very specific selection of voters in urban areas and suburban areas, so they win those and do awful in every other riding.
But that's how you win the whole country. Isn't that wild?
Yeah. You cater yourself to about 30% of the population, and for some reason, they really like you, and then you just win. And Rocco just said, at the same time, we are not USA we're not voting for our own PM. And yes, I think that is actually one of the biggest flaws in the Canadian government system. And if
I rant about this every time it comes up. Oh my god.
I'll be honest, I think this is only the number 2 thing I would change if I was redrafting the Constitution behind the Charter, which is awful, but that's for different reasons. But electing the Prime Minister separately from your MP is just so necessary. Not only for democracy purposes, so you can actually have an informed vote on your local candidate and an informed vote on your PM, but also for parliamentary supremacy reasons, because it would give your local MP more freedom to go against party line because they have a direct mandate themselves. Whereas right now, if you look at polling, people basically don't vote for their local MP. They vote for the party and they vote for the PM. And a local person is like a distant third, like not even close. But if you remove the PM from that ballot, so you're voting for your local candidate and your political party, that empowers the local candidate a lot more.
Yeah. Mike says, I hear a lot of people talking about it as the courts fucking over defendants because they are too busy. If the states are under no obligation to relitigate cases, even if there's evidence of bad counsel. I don't know if we have that in Canada either. That's kind of, that's certainly a difficult situation. I'm interested in why it was an arbitration. Oh my goodness, what have I done? I'm interested in why it was an arbitration case and not just an appeal to the conviction. Unless the appeal was... Well, actually, you know what? So, the appeal structure is interesting because the appeal... Actually, no, I think appeals can take new evidence. Depending on... they would have to... There's, like, certain circumstances where appeals, at least in Canada, can take new evidence as far as I know. Don't quote me on this because I haven't taken anything procedural yet. So my understanding is still fairly limited, but when you appeal a case, they will normally just take the evidence that was found by the trial judge. So there's not necessarily anything new submitted, but at the same time, that doesn't sound right, and I'm pretty sure that you can submit new evidence, at least in Canada. So I'm interested why that was an arbitration trial and not an appeal, because on appeal, a remedy for an appeal can be the ordering of a new trial. Like, that happens all the time. In fact, I would pretty confidently say that the outcome of an appeal, if it's going to be in the appellant's favor, is not usually just a reversal of whatever the decision was. It's usually just ordering a new trial. So I'm surprised that they didn't appeal and do it that way rather than doing it through arbitration. Rocco says, Lexie, I still quote you. Don't worry. Oh, no, please don't. I'm not a legal expert. Don't quote me.
You can quote me, though. I know even less about legal stuff, but you know what? Just throw it out there. All my legal claims. Mike G, second last comment you just said was, so PM still forms government and draws minister from parliament? Yeah, so the way I would envision how the election would work is you would vote for two people on your ballot. You would have your local MP and you would have your PM. And you tick off the PM box for whichever PM you want, and you tick off local candidate for whichever local candidate you want. The winner PM would then be able to pick anybody they want to form their cabinet, because they are the prime minister. And you would no longer have competence votes. Like, voting down the budget wouldn't cause a new election for the prime minister. It would just mean the budget's defeated in a lot of ways. Now, you might get into some weirdness like the US has, where you might not have the money to actually spend anything if that happens, but it is what it is. I don't think there's a problem with that. People always make a big deal about the US debt ceiling stuff, but I think that's a legitimate thing to have a political fight over. So basically, in this regard, the prime minister would be, and the executive would actually be genuinely separate from the legislature. The legislature would control voting on things, and the budget and a lot of stuff would come from the PM.
Mike says the appeal by the defendant was a success, but the prosecutor appealed the appeal up to the Supreme Court, which the prosecutor won. Okay, so that's probably just like the... I wouldn't say that that's so much the courts choosing not to order a new trial just because they're wasting time. Like, that's the regular appeals process. Like, that's not really the court making a pragmatic decision, because the appeals process itself is hugely time consuming. Like, if the court started making decisions based on what's time consuming, aside from like floodgate stuff, which is a little bit different, but that would be kind of counterintuitive, especially since the appeals process is so extensive. So that just sounds like they lost an appeal at the Supreme level, and in which case I would probably say that they're SOL, but I imagine there were reasons that the prosecution won that appeal, probably due to flaws in the prior appeal. And their best bet's probably going to go the civil route and try to get at least some damage recovery from the shitty lawyers, because it's a lot easier to win in civil court because the standard of proof is a lot lower. So that sucks, but it doesn't really sound like the court's doing anything out of the ordinary or particularly malicious. Like, this is just how the court system works. The only solution, like quote-unquote solution to that, would be if you went from a perspective that the appellant is automatically right. Because there's still a chance that the appellant actually isn't correct, and that their lawyer's incompetence is not the reason that they got convicted, right? Like, you would have to, the only way to, like, quote-unquote fix that problem is to kind of, like, hedge the appeal in the original defendant's favor, which is not how the court system works, and it's not how it should work. So it's kind of like there's this saying that extreme cases make bad law, and this seems to be one of those situations. Like, you don't want to overhaul your whole court system because you get an unsatisfactory outcome in one case. Like, that's just how life is sometimes. So sounds like the civil route is probably going to be the best remedy for that situation there. Chris, you want to grab Rocco's comment?
Yes, I was about to do that. Rocco just said, I am not for your current election format. In the line, government has the power to call elections. We should do the U.S. way of set time every 4 years for an election. Yeah, I completely agree. So I'm obviously not going to, like, completely walk through every single change I would do to Canada's government if I was given the power to just redraft the Constitution as I saw fit. But there's just a lot of elements in our Constitution that really should be changed, because they're not very democratic. for lack of a better term. The ability for the government to call a snap election is one of the most terrible ideas you can have, and you cannot create a Westminster system without giving the power to the government to call a snap election. It's impossible. You can't legislate against it, because even if you make it so that constitutionally that the Prime Minister can't call a snap election, you get to the problem that the Prime Minister could just create a bill that pleases the people that like them, but no one else could support. And then the bill will get vetoed, will get voted down, and then you, have a snap election. Or their opponents cave, and they get a really big bill passed. Like, let's give a hypothetical example. In the U.S., let's say the U.S. was a Westminster system. And a lot of times I use the U.S. here because Canada doesn't really have very bitter political disagreements, so they don't make very good examples, but the U.S. does. So, and let's say hypothetically, in this Westminster system U.S., right now, obviously the Democrats have a majority, so they would be able to call a snap election. Let's say they don't want to call a snap election, or they can't. They could just make a bill, a confidence motion, that says that it's going to legalize abortion completely, all the way to birth. The Republicans would vote it down. That would cause an election. There you go. So you don't have to.
Mike says
that's just the problem with the Westminster system. It always is going to have snap elections, either officially or unofficially.
Mike says, I would recommend looking into it, Lexie, because it's complicated and I don't totally get it, nor can I convey properly. I believe you that it's complicated. Everything in law is fucking complicated. I would, that would be, not gonna lie, I might look into it a little bit, like commentary. I probably won't read the cases myself because those tend to be like 1,000 pages long and there would be at least 3 of them that I have to read, plus whatever was in the trials. So I probably am not gonna put that much work into it, I'll be honest, since I'm on my summer break, but yeah, it's super difficult to talk about any kind of court case in short form because it's always more complicated than it is on the surface.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing everyone can say about law. It's more complicated than you think it is.
Oh, yeah, no lawyer can ever give you a straight answer, and don't hold that against them because that's just how law is.
I think realistically, you could take a meaningful percentage of trials that actually go to court, and if you were to redo that trial with a fresh judge and a fresh jury, like 1,000 times, you'd probably see like a reasonable percentage that the other side would win. It wouldn't be like 100% of the time the same side wins. It'd be like 70-30 or something. If you just kept doing it again with fresh juries and fresh lawyers and fresh judges and stuff, but obviously
especially with like the new age judicial philosophies of like, I'm going to use my time on the bench to change the law as I see fit and not just interpret it. Mike has a question for you, Chris.
Yes. Mike said, what do you think of allowing voters to recall MP or MLA in the area? Easy. Chad, yes.
Chad, yes.
So, this would be one of the things I think really any democratic reform needs. I think recall votes should always be a thing everywhere, and I also would like to see ballot initiatives become a thing, because realistically, we are the voters. We are voting for a candidate to represent us. If we no longer think the politician represents us, we should be able to get rid of them. Why do we have to wait 4 years for the next election? Like a classic example, let's say you vote, you're in Fredericton in 2019. You voted a Green MP. She crossed the floor of the Liberals. Now, if you were a Green voter, you could be very upset with this. And I think you'd be perfectly within your right to demand a recall because you did not vote for a Liberal. And the way our system works is you're not voting for your local person, you're voting for the party. So, Rocco just said, I think that is my favorite quote. We are giving our politicians gasoline to use on the fire, and the fire is already too huge to control. In a lot of ways, that is the best way to describe monetary policy that our governments, the entire West is using right now. Not just Canada, the entire West. And you see this with liberals and mainstream media trying to defend the central bank head Tiff Macklem. Right now, they're like, well, Canada's not the only one with high inflation. Oh, that's your quote? That's a fantastic quote, Rocco. But it's the best way to describe a lot of things. But what they say is that like all the countries have inflation right now, and it's just sitting here. It's like, do you guys like remember when you were a kid and you wanted to do something stupid? And your mom's like, if your friends wanted to jump off a bridge, would you? And you're like, no,
the answer is always yes.
I wouldn't jump off a bridge. That's basically what the liberals are doing, or in this case, Sheree and other people in the mainstream media are doing about firing Tiff Macklem. It's like, well, everyone else printed a shitload of money. He's not the only one. Everyone has inflation. It's like
kind of like how Sheree brings everything back to Harper for some reason, as if anybody cares anymore.
It's just like,
Rocco, that's cursed.
I don't care what the governor of the Bank of England or the head of the Federal Reserve in the US or whatever the Euro Central Banker is called did. Yeah, they probably all printed too much money. That doesn't mean Tiff Macklem gets off the hook. He's the head of the Central Bank of Canada. It's his decision. He could decide, you know what, maybe we shouldn't print $600 billion. Oops.
Maybe we shouldn't. We shouldn't just crash the economy.
Maybe we should use fiscal responsibility. Maybe. It is truly the most just bizarre thing. And in fact, bear with me here. Will this work properly? Here we go. So, here's a graph. I like graphs. I hope you have noticed. This is Canada's M1 money supply versus time. I hope there's a delay in the stream, I think. Anyways, as you can see, it's going up. It's a slight curve. It should be a positively inflected curve because we technically aim for 2% inflation. You can argue or disagree with that, but that's what we do. So it should be technically it should be a quadratic. I'm getting too mathy nerd here.
Quadratic is the straight line?
No, it's like the U shape, kind of. Parabola.
It's been a long time since high school, man. Not the bagels, they're gone. Oh, sorry, legit hackers.
And you see here that it goes up, then we hit 2020, and then instead of this gentle curve, we go bloop, as $500 billion is printed. Bravo, Tiff Macklem. Bravo. And look, we have unprecedented inflation. Who would have thought? You just doubled the 50% increase in the M1 money supply. You dumbass.
In the words of one of my favorite YouTubers, you fucking wingnut.
Yeah, like, you don't get to go home and claim, well, the EU Central Bank printed a bunch of money. Why did you print $500 billion? Why would you do that?
They want to play the inflation game, too. Rocco says, it feels like we were becoming Germany in the 1920s, and Chris, I love that website. I'm not familiar with that website. Is it good?
Depends on what you want it for. It gives you a bunch of information about economics.
Weren't you recently tweeting about Quebec's stats website? Stats website's very greatly in quality.
Elections Quebec, it's great. Like, when I was trying to get the data for the Ontario stuff, for like the ridings, it took so many hoops, and it was so difficult to find out the riding demographics because it's not anywhere on any Ontario government websites easily. Like, you can sort of do it through interpolation and stuff like that, but it's not nicely done. Quebec, you go to Elections Quebec, go to, like, riding profiles, boom, spreadsheet. It'll tell you all the things you want to know. The only gripe is they don't give you education in simple categories. They just give you degree, like the type of education people got. So it's like economics or electrician. And it's like, this is too detailed for me, Quebec. This is too much information.
Is it an HTML file, though?
No, it is a spreadsheet because they're not heathens like Stats Canada. Why would you make an HTML file? Why would you do that?
But the American sites are good, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's just Canada. Canada's just terrible. Well, English Canada's apparently just terrible at stats. The US is wonderful. You can find... If you go to, like, the US budget, if you want to find out about that, their website, the Treasury Department, they'll have a spreadsheet and it'll tell you the fucking stuff for, like, 50 years. Canada, you try to find out what the budgetary expenditure in Canada is. It's so hard to find it in a manner that is useful.
Good fucking luck. Yeah, you were complaining about that for days. That you were trying to find out how much each province spends on healthcare or something, and you simply could not find it.
I could not find it. It was not easily findable on Google.
It's wild, man.
On an unrelated topic to that, though, because I'm now reminded about this, I recently looked in Nova Scotia. So, private school in Nova Scotia costs approximately 16,000 Canadian money. The federal
per year or in general?
Per year, per student.
Okay.
Public school in Nova Scotia costs about $15,000 per year per student. Studies show private school is superior to public school for education outcomes. So you're telling me that spending $1,000 more in private school gives you better outcomes? What's wrong with the public school system? Government, what are you doing wrong? Well, obviously it's the government. That's why it's wrong.
Mike says, I think the California high-speed rail is a cautionary tale of ballot initiatives, but their system prevents the legislature from affecting or amending the bill. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, so just for the pros who are not familiar, they started building a high-speed rail network because of ballot initiatives that passed. Or it might have been the motivation for it. I'm not 100% sure what the details are, but the high-speed rail was just a terrible idea to begin with because they wanted to build it from San Fran to LA, I believe. It might have been LA to San Diego. I don't know, one of the two between LA and another major city in California. And like California is just so far apart, and the demand for this was so low, and the cost of work in America, especially in liberal states like California, is so high for construction projects that it was going to cost like $400 billion, and it was probably never going to pay itself back. And even
did they just scrap it?
They just scrapped it after spending like billions of dollars doing it, because they basically found out, they decided that even if you consider the broad social aspects as a net gain, it still wasn't going to make the money back because it's just so expensive. Now, I think it's more of a cautionary tale of onerous government regulations making construction too expensive, but well,
I mean, that is kind of a massive project.
It is, but still. But I will, in general, I will agree, Mike, that ballot initiatives are something I have to be careful with. And I would say a ballot initiative... Oh, is it still going? I thought they scrapped it. Well, I'll finish what I'm saying. I think ballot initiatives should have a reasonably high threshold. Like, I'm thinking like 60-something% people need to support it for it to be done. Because that basically just means only things that are really popular will get done through it, and everything else has to be done through the normal political channels. But if something is super popular and the politicians aren't doing it, that gives people a possibility to avoid it.
Ballot initiatives are interesting because they're kind of like the modern methodology of carrying out like a truly democratic system where everybody votes on everything, which to me sounds like a nightmare, and this kind of demonstrates why.
Well, that's why the ballot initiative proposals, I think, the best way to do that, because what's the word for it? Generally speaking, you need a decent percentage. Like I think it's in California, it's like 10,000 or something like that signatures before it can be accepted. Maybe it's 100,000. I don't know. It's a quite a high bar of signatures, so it's not going to be very common that this happens. And I think that's the way to do it. Like I think Switzerland goes too far because Switzerland, most things are voted by referendum. And well, at least
I guess
it leads to a lot of interesting things. It does mean that you don't get like corrupt politicians stopping things from happening that people want, but it also means that things that the most people like, which are discriminatory, can stay on forever. Like, so.
Okay, but when you say that, like you say, a ballot initiative means that corrupt politicians can't stop something from happening that people want, but like, isn't that exactly what happened with Brexit for like several years? Where they had to have like 3 referendums or something to make it actually go through?
No, it was only 1 referendum. The problem with Brexit is it wasn't a binding referendum. It wasn't legally required to do it. The U.S. ballot initiatives are legally required to follow.
I see. Mike says the way the ballot initiative works there, since people haven't voted to repeal the initiative, it has to happen no matter what. Oof. That's maybe it'll just bankrupt California and we can solve 2 birds with 1 stone.
I mean, California started doing that to themselves.
Are they still spending like a modest year's salary on every homeless person and still having gigantic problems?
Probably. I mean, it's a meme at this point in the U.S. that like San Francisco streets are just covered in poop, so...
Mike says he's not from California, he just watches a lot of infrastructure media. Oh yeah, your father is the civil engineer, right? Or the civil planner or something like that? I didn't know that there was much infrastructure media, to be honest with you, but I guess there's something for every niche.
There's a lot, actually. I won't say...
Really? Is that like a genre?
I won't say infrastructure tube is my high up there on the things I listen to, but I do... what's the word for it? I'm a big fan of learning about random nonsense.
Man, you can really make a community around anything in the internet age now, can't you?
Yes. Name a thing, it has an entire YouTube subsection.
Kind of good. I'm a big fan of that sort of, like the thriving of niche interests.
Oh.
It's kind of like how if you live in a big city, you can find like a little store for any hobby that you can name. No, father was Department of Natural Resources and Electricity. Man, who's the... Oh, Rocco, your father's the civil planner. Okay. Sorry, I'm notoriously bad at mixing people up. Chris can vouch for that. I'm terrible.
She's bad at mixing people up. I'm bad at remembering how old people are. Sometimes I don't even remember how old I am.
No. You're bad at initially finding out how old people are. It's not even to the point of remembering if you don't know to start with.
I mean, you're right. You're right.
Although he has had to ask me how his own age before, so...
Early onset Alzheimer's at 24. I'm just doomed.
You were 21 at the time.
Doesn't matter. Now, important question for the chat here. Which bagel is the best one in this image?
Oh, yeah, so let's explain. I hope that it comes across, but it's supposed to be like a bar graph made of bagels, and I thought that was really fucking clever when I came up with that. But when I was making the different types of bagels, I just pulled 4 different types of bagels out of my ass, and I stacked them in random quantities until it looked okay, so, like, this doesn't actually represent my opinion of the best Canadian bagel. So, I don't know. What do we, Lexi burn Chris? Yeah, listen, a healthy exchange of burns is important to any healthy relationship. But yeah, I'm interested in the chat's opinion on which bagel is the greatest Canadian bagel. There's definitely more options than this, too. I wanted to put in like an onion garlic bagel, but I didn't know how to draw that. So I decided not to.
You're clearly missing the best bagel from childhood, which was the chocolate chip bagel.
Well, if you...
Those are...
You could mistake the raisin bagel for a chocolate chip bagel like everybody did as a kid.
And then you'd be sorely disappointed when you have a raisin bagel, not a chocolate chip bagel.
Hey, I like a cinnamon raisin bagel. Raisin but need to be cinnamon. Yeah, I couldn't fit cinnamon raisin on the little card without it looking weird.
Yeah, that's too many words.
After that is Chris. What, like the Canadian flag red bagel? It's actually funny. So I had two ideas for the splash screen. One was this one, which won. But the other one was going to be like a table with 2 plates and 2 bagels. And one would be the red and white bagel that would be Chris. And then one would be a white bagel with a red filling, and that would be me. And they would bounce when we talked, because I know how to do that from my personal streaming endeavors. But I thought that was too much work, so I decided not to do it.
Mike
says...
Oh, you go,
Flex. Oh, sorry. Oh, I was just going to read out the comment. Our best supper table conversations were usually about provincial versus feds versus municipalities versus private interests versus First Nations fighting over resource management. Yeah, that makes that makes sense with your father's line of work. What were you going to say, Chris?
I was just going to read the same comment.
Oh, yeah. It's funny what kind of conversations you end up having depending on what your parents do for a living. Like, Chris, you and your father have some very heated conversations, like, on the daily.
It's not
about
heated.
That would never come.
It is heated. Everyone gets confused because their voices get loud, but that doesn't mean it's
because you yell
heated.
At each other.
No.
It's funny, guys. I went to his house one time because it was close to where I was working, because I was working 2 jobs at the time, and I wanted to take a nap in between my 2 shifts. So I went to his house to crash there, and I was woken up by 2 floors below me, him and his dad yelling at each other about some random political conversation they were having.
Look, one thing I've noticed in my life is that there's 2 types of families. One type of family has heated discussions about politics, the other doesn't.
Mine's the kind that
like
doesn't.
Most
Mine's
things in life, you can categorize them in A and not A.
Mike says, don't have a favorite bagel. I've not had one that I don't like. That's impressive. Actually, you know what? I can't think of any bagels that I've, like, had and thought, like, wow, this is terrible. But I have had bagel toppings that I don't like. Particularly peanut butter, because that shit is dry and sticky, and I don't know how Chris eats it every day.
I don't eat it every day.
You often eat bagels with peanut butter on them.
I do often, but not every day. Some days
I don't know how you do it ever.
Some days I have other food.
How do you swallow with that much dry stickiness going on? Cream cheese forever.
No. Down at the cream cheese. Ban cream
I don't know what your problem is with cream cheese. I could eat cream cheese with a spoon. That stuff is delicious. Oh god, what have I done?
No. You're wrong. Rocco, I might have missed this, but you said in the next stream you should do that. What is that?
Oh, I think he was talking to me about the idea I had about the 2 different bagels that bounce when we talk. Which, I mean, I might give it a try, because normally I've got, like, I have a job and my own stream schedule to keep track of, so I don't, like, sometimes I don't have time to make thumbnails or screens or whatever, so I gotta squeeze them in last minute, so that's why I went with this one, because it was a bit easier. Rocco says, Lexie, you should have said Chris, because that is my great boyfriend bagel. Oh, that's cute. Yeah, my favorite bagel is Chris, for sure.
The best bagel. Only bagel a girl needs.
Yeah, the table with 2 bagels.
Yeah.
Oh man. I think we went over the origin story of the name of your channel.
Yeah, we did.
And you actually did steal it from that bagel place in Montreal or Ontario, wherever it was.
It's not stealing. We are distinct businesses with distinct markets.
Which you only know because I told you.
It's not trademark infringement if there's no reasonable way someone could get confused between the two of them.
That's probably, yeah, that's true. It's certainly an interesting choice for a polling and politics channel.
Well, what's better than Canadian bagels? I don't know.
Speaking of polling and politics, though, I still think that you should do a video series on the Federalist Papers. You did so much research into those.
See, that would require two things. One's an easy hurdle of acquiring a copy of the Federalist Papers. And the second is having time to come up with an interesting video.
I'm sure you can buy a copy of all the Federalist Papers on Amazon.
Yes, you can. That's why I said it's an easy hurdle.
Rocco says, Lexie, please put a link to your channel. I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm trying to be very careful to keep my personal streaming activities very separate from this channel, because I'm doing gaming streaming, and it is not a friendly environment for the kind of political views that I have, and I'm kind of high-key terrified of the things that I say on this channel being found out on that side of my online activities, which, I mean, it sounds disingenuous, but it is a legitimate fear. Not that I have anything against the streaming community that I'm in now, but I know that, you know, I say I have a lot of hot takes on here, and I really don't want to cross those two worlds over. So maybe someday I'll link my channel, but I'm gonna keep that separate for now. So I'm sorry, Rocco. I really appreciate your interest, but I'm not quite ready to do that just yet. But I do appreciate your interest, so thank you for that. I hope you understand.
Now, that said, you did say something that reminded me of something, so I'm going to announce early here, but once the Ontario election is done and dusted, we're going to introduce a new series on the channel.
Oh, right, I remember.
And this series is going to likely be once a month, and we're going to call it Hot Take Tuesdays, where I'm going to...
Hot Take Tuesdays.
Or on a Tuesday, once a month, probably aiming for the second Tuesday, I'm going to make a video, or possibly have a guest make a video, in case possibly Lexie or maybe someone else. That is a hot take about something, backed up by as much evidence as they can find, and it's just going to be spicy. That is the idea, and that's going to be part of the coverage over the summer while I'm waiting for Quebec and the US midterm elections to be close enough for it to be relevant. Because right now, I have actually the Quebec model working, but let's round it up to June. That election's in October. It's 4 months away. The polling right now doesn't matter for that. So.
Yeah, I'm already thinking about some takes that I would be willing to do research into, because I know I'm a law student, and this is kind of antithetical to that, but I'm like allergic to research. I fucking hate every part of that process.
Now, also worth noting, to those currently watching and any future viewer who might watch the VOD of this, and if you are a future viewer, put a comment. If you have ideas for a series, or ideas for things you want to see me cover, or elections you want to see me cover, by all means, give them to me, let me know. I can always make videos out of them, or shelve them for future ideas when I need more content. My only thing with covering more elections is I only want to cover countries that I know enough about for it to be relevant. Like, personally, I'm somewhat interested in the Brazilian election this year, but I just do not know enough about Brazilian politics to cover Brazil. And
because isn't your model heavily based on an understanding of the politics in the area to help you understand how things should be weighted?
Heavily is not quite correct word, but it is really important to understand the politics of the area and the opinions of people so you can understand what's going on, so you can understand if a poll is wrong or which way things typically overpoll or underpoll, stuff like that. It does really matter, and it's just... I'm interested in seeing if Bolsonaro will get reelected. I just do not know enough about Brazil to cover it. No,
Chris, Rocco really, really wants you to make a bagel and talk about politics while wearing a full Canadian suit. I don't know what that would be, but
a full
he
Canadian
really wants you to
suit
do it.
would be jeans and a
Like-
jean jacket.
Like jeans and a jean jacket. Not like some kind of Don Cherry getup, because that would be fun too.
A whole series. You know what? Just live stream myself making breakfast.
Apparently that's a thing. People will do like cook-along streams. Well, they'll stream themselves cooking a recipe, and viewers
Now,
can like
my
cook along with
my
them.
one question to you, Lexie, is that people or is that hot women?
I think the last person I saw doing it was a dude, so I think it's just people.
Okay. Because a lot of the time you'll see these like really derpy streams. People are like, wow, people will watch someone do this, and it's like, well, no, people won't watch people do that. It's men will watch a hot woman do something.
No, these are usually people with like 80 viewers, but 80 viewers is a pretty nice spot on Twitch because you can keep up with your chat and you still make a surprising amount of money. So
Well,
that's usually where it's at.
clearly-
The thing that you're talking about are like the 10K streams.
Clearly, the big brain here is I do a stream of myself at my desk for work, and it's just me staring at a monitor all day, being confused.
It's you getting up for lunch while you wait for tests to run.
Yeah. If there was a job that was a reality television show, it would not be software. Software is the most boring thing to watch because everything is happening inside my head and nothing is happening elsewhere. Even the work I do for this channel would be more interesting because at least I'm using the internet and I'm like looking up things and I'm making spreadsheets. But that's still pretty boring unless you are me. Because obviously I don't find it boring. Or else why are we doing this? This is like a comically large amount of work.
It really is too.
I work
But
like,
it's not a consistent amount of work. It's like either nothing or everything.
during the peak at the French election, I think I was working 25 hours a week for the channel.
You work probably more for the channel than you do for your actual job.
Honestly, probably.
Because your actual job, a lot of it is just waiting, and then every now and then you'll have to do like 2 weeks of overtime to fix a certain bug. But then the rest of the time is just nothing.
Oh, Rocco. Data, charts. That's the best. Also maps. I like maps.
Have I told you guys the Fitbit story? Because I got Chris a Fitbit for Christmas a few years ago, and he was like, I'm not going to use this. And I'm like, Chris, this will turn information about your body and your health into charts. This is exactly what you want. And I was right. Every morning he would send me a screenshot of his like sleep overview graph from his Fitbit every morning. Like this, and you still wear it. Like anything, if you can make anything into charts, Chris is into it.
Gotta love charts.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually, so like, so one thing I actually really dislike the most about politics actually is politicians love using data, but they love lying to you with the data they're using because they, as far as I can tell, pretty much everybody intentionally misuses data. Like, oftentimes what they'll do is, I'll just pick on some off the top of my head here. So like, go back to earlier, like gun control people will make a map, be like, this is the murder rate, this is gun ownership rates in states, and you look at it, because I saw this recently, and they have a map of the U.S. and they have different states by gun ownership and colors and murder rates, and you just look at it, it's like, what does this even tell me? I don't even know what you're trying to say here. Or Hillary Clinton posted this one recently, it's like, a random arbitrary selection of countries, gun murders on one axis, gun ownership in the other axis, or guns per capita in the other axis. It's like, first off, this is cherry picked. It's a random selection of countries. And second, what? Of course, more guns is more gun murders. That's not the argument.
Chris, you should look at chat.
That is my porn, Chris. Maps, charts, graphs.
Oh God, don't read it like that. That's terrible. I wake up in the middle of the night and just look at them. That's Isn't there a whole subreddit called map porn? That's just maps?
It's so F tier now, though. Like, it used to be decent, but now it's just awful. Because, like, especially with, what's the word for it? Between all the random shit going on in the U.S. with, like, Roe v. Wade and these recent shootings, or the Ukraine-Russia war, it's just, all the maps are just stupid. They're just dumb.
Mike says, nice stream. I'm going to go watch the new Obi-Wan show before bed. Good night. Thank you so much for coming, Mike. Actually, we are running up on our end time as well. I think we've only got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah.
Are you interested in that show, Chris? I haven't heard of that.
I've not heard of it. Or, well, I know it exists. None of my friends have watched it yet, but I have a bunch of big Star Wars friends. So...
You're a big Star Wars friend.
I was until Disney bought it. Disney's really killed the series for me. The Mandalorian's not bad. Like, it's probably the best thing they've made in Star Wars recently. But the movies they've made other than Rogue One have just been so soulless. They don't fit the...
That's a good way to put it.
They don't fit the series, and they feel so corporate. Like, ignoring all the woke crap about them, they're just so corporate. Like, no one on the project has passion anymore, apparently. Though, at least Filoni and those guys with Mandalorian seem to have more passion for the series. So, that might be hope, but...
Did Gina Carano end up getting taken off the show?
I believe she has.
That's a shame. Wasn't she, like, one of the better actors, too?
I won't say she's a good or bad actor, because I've only seen her in one thing, so it's hard to say off one experience. Because no matter how good someone is at that role doesn't mean they're a good actor, right? Because they could have been typecast.
True.
But I did really like her in the role in the show, so I'm kind of sad to see her go. For a dumb reason.
For a very dumb reason.
What even was it? Didn't she say it's like COVID restrictions are like the Holocaust or something like that? Or like the Jew stories?
It wasn't even that. She retweeted something from like the Holocaust Association or one of those museums about how like day one wasn't cooking Jews in ovens. It started out with vilifying a part of the population, and she was making a parallel to what was happening with COVID restrictions and political polarization in general, where you vilify a certain side of the population to the point that it becomes easier to justify actions against them, and how it was about that kind of slow creep of dehumanization. And it was a tweet, I think, by like a Holocaust museum, and people got really mad because apparently that was anti-Semitic. But I've been told that I've been anti-Semitic before because I made a joke that I thought was hilarious because Australia at the time was dealing with a mouse plague, which I didn't know was a thing, but if you watch the videos, it's fucking crazy. Like, they have just billions of mice causing famine because they're, like, eating all of their produce and shit and contaminating everything, and, like, it's terrible. And I made a joke that that with this mice plague going on so hard that Australia should probably let the Hebrews go. And apparently people didn't get the joke, and they thought I was being an anti-Semite, and it was kind of hilarious because I'm honestly shocked that you can live in an English-speaking society and not get a reference to Exodus when you see one. But of course, when you have to explain the joke, it's not funny anymore. I stand by that joke. That was hilarious.
I do find it funny, actually, when left-wingers go out and be like, you're anti-Semitic because you disagree with George Soros. And it's like, are all Jews George Soros? Can you not criticize that? Like, what? Or in the case of Gina Carano's tweet, you make a Holocaust allusion. Anti-Semitic. And it's like, but everyone does that. Jews do that. Are Jews anti-Semitic?
Rocco says, shh, Chris, don't want Lexie to know you look at maps, charts, and graphs porn before you go to bed. Please don't read that in a sexy ASMR voice. Don't worry, I know. I don't quite understand your other messages. Who wants the the rants? It's a little bit late to be ranting. It's just about time that we wrap this up. By the way,
Yeah.
I don't know if is there anything else that you wanna discuss before we go.
No, I think I have exhausted the topics for today. One thing I will note in general, I'm probably not going to have a super consistent schedule of these early on just because work schedule. Though they're going to be on Fridays, and I'll try to give you heads up on the before the stream on like a Sunday or something. If they're going to happen, it's going to depend on having topics to discuss and stuff like that. That makes sense.
And if you want to know when those videos and streams are happening, you should follow his Twitter for updates because he puts everything on there.
Yes, you can follow me at BagelPolling on Twitter, and you'll see all sorts of random stuff, but also when videos are coming up, especially with non-normal series like my election forecast series. I post preview thumbnails of all those the day before.
He also posts memes, which are pretty good.
At least between the two of us, we think they're good.
Yeah, especially when it's just the thumbnail that I made for your single transferable vote tier list. It's funny, I was watching his single transferable vote video earlier, and he was talking about how it's the most complicated voting system. And I half expected him to go on to say, my girlfriend got confused when I was explaining it to her to draw the thumbnail because I did. I ended up making that flowchart thumbnail because I couldn't come up with a graphical representation of this, so I just made a really confusing looking flowchart. I thought that shit was funny. I cracked up when I was making that. Because single transferable vote is so fucking complicated.
It is. Though with that,
Rocco says, "Don't leave. It was a great stream and good night. Thank you for doing streams on Friday nights." Yeah, it's a good time for everybody, I think. Yeah. I have work in the morning, but it's not super late for us here, so I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah, I think it's a good time. That said,
but yeah, with that,
we bid you adieu, and at least I will see you on Sunday with an Ontario update, and we will both see you next week on Thursday for Ontario live stream.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. See you on Thursday.
With that, goodbye.
Bye.